Chapter 450. In the lobby of Myriad Herbs Hall, Jean Dan Chi and his brothers were hugging the glinting object tightly, their bodies shivering violently. The old Taoist with a green skin walked up to them with a strange smile on his face. With great difficulty, he squeezed out a smile that could barely be considered as kind, then asked the brothers, "Fellow Taoists, your energy-rotting ghost mushroom is a good item." The people of Myriad Herbs Hall wanted a share of it, but how could there be such a good thing under the heaven? "That's why we killed them." The old Taoist cleared his throat and said with a smile, "Don't worry, we are both good people." "Hee, but, what do you want?" Shivering, the brothers huddled together. The ruthless and merciless slaughter of the few heaven immortals had truly frightened them. The two brothers were just worrying about how to avoid the 10,000 Herbs Hall and how to get rid of the entanglement of the 10,000 Herbs Hall so that they could successfully sell the energy-rotting ghost mushroom at a high price, but the entire 10,000 Herbs Hall was slaughtered. This cruel scene directly taught them a lesson. This was the true face of a cultivator. Ching Su Immortal Pass was guarded by a general of the human race, but these heaven immortals were still killing and robbing people, committing such an evil deed in broad daylight. Although the two brothers were a little cunning, they were nothing more than some petty tricks. How could they bear the psychological impact when they suddenly saw this kind of bloody murder? When the old Taoist asked them what they wanted, the brothers were stunned for a long while before they finally reacted. The older brother said carefully, "As for immortal items and spirit items, our cultivation base is too shallow, so we dare not to think too much about them. We just want a slightly superior cultivation method and some magic treasures that we can use." The younger brother added hastily, "Energy stones, and the energy stones we need for our cultivation. The more, the better. The highest bidder will get them." Wu Qi gave the other 7 heaven immortals a sideways glance. 4 of them had a cultivation base of 36th tier, and 2 of them were 35th tier. The old Taoist with a green skin had the highest cultivation base, as he had barely stepped into the 34th tier. Since they were able to rush to Myriad Herbs Hall after hearing the news, all 7 of them were from the evil path. No cultivator from the righteous path, be it Taoists or monks, would be interested in the energy-rotting ghost mushroom. They were evil cultivators. A cruel smile emerged on Wu Qi's face. The black dragon spirit ring hanging around his neck moved slightly, then spat out a stream of powder from its mouth. It was the powdered drunken dragon incense. Wu Qi's muscles flowed like flowing water, allowing the drunken dragon fragrance to slowly slide down his chest, gradually reaching his navel. Wu Qi's muscles contracted, filling his belly button with a pinch of drunken dragon incense, which looked like a miniature incense burner. The true essence within Wu Qi's body slowly revolved, and a faint trace of true fire appeared in his belly button, slowly burning away the drunken dragon incense. A faint fragrance wafted out from Wu Qi's body. There were large amounts of low-grade herbs in the 10,000 Herb Hall's main hall. The herbs gave off a very strong medicinal smell, so this little fragrance was not noticeable at all. Wu Qi carefully controlled the fragrance, letting it slowly spread out, not letting people inhale too much at once. The green-skinned Taoist chuckled. He patted the younger brother's shoulder in a friendly manner, then asked with a smile, "They are just some energy stones, easy to get. We don't care about them at all." Where did you find this energy-rotting ghost mushroom?" The elder brother answered hastily, "We found this energy-rotting ghost mushroom in Mount Wangue in Pang province of Diyu." Upon hearing that, the green-skinned old Taoist casually patted the elder brother's head with his palm. A weak palm thunder shot out and exploded the elder brother's head into countless drops of blood and gore that sprayed in all directions. Before the younger brother could cry out in shock, the green-skinned old Taoist gave him a backhand slap and exploded his head as well. Clapping his hands happily, the old Taoist grabbed the glowing object and threw it onto the 7 storage bags placed in the center of the main hall. "Alright, now we have the source of this object. If any of you are interested, you can go to Mount Wangue and look for the fortuitous encounter," he said with a smile. Rubbing his palms complacently, the old Taoist smiled and said, "Now, we're going to do things according to the old rules." Apart from these 7 bags of spirit herbs, we'll bid for them separately. The fellow immortal who offers the highest bid will get this energy-rotting ghost mushroom, and the other 7 will share his bid, as well as the 7 bags of spirit herbs. Ha ha ha, this energy-rotting ghost mushroom is an upper-tier 5th-grade spirit herb, and it can poison even gold immortals. This treasure is very useful to us. No sooner had the green-skinned old Taoist finished speaking, a middle-aged Taoist clad in a red robe pointed at Wu Qi and said, "Fellow Taoist, please show us some of your skills, so that we can see if you are qualified to do things according to the old rules." Ha! The few immortals from the Evil League all fixed their eyes on Wu Qi. They chuckled as Chi-Chi took a step closer to Wu Qi. Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Is this the old rules? When you see a good treasure, you have to kill all those who are not strong enough, and then, those who are strong enough will decide the ownership of the treasure according to their bids." The few evil immortals laughed at the same time. They nodded and said, "That's right. That's the rule in Qing Su Immortal Pass." Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, then chuckled and said in a low voice, "I like this rule. Don't you feel weak all over?" As Wu Qi spoke, 4 36th-tier heaven immortals suddenly fell to the ground without making a sound. The knees of 2 35th-tier heaven immortals turned soft, and they staggered a few steps forward while crying out in terror, "What happened? Our immortal energy. What is that? How did we? The green-skinned old Taoist, who had the highest cultivation base among them, felt his vision turning dark, and his body feeling weak and itchy. The immortal energy in his body had been weakened by more than half, and the cultivation base he could exert now was at most that of a 36th-tier heaven immortal. "What is?" cried the green-skinned old Taoist. With a blink of his body, 4 fiend shadows darted out of Wu Qi's body, leaving numerous afterimages in the air as they soundlessly fused into the bodies of 3 heaven immortals, who could still maintain their sanity. Blood gushed out of their bodies, and the 3 heaven immortals howled miserably at the same time. Suddenly, a crack burst open between their brows, from which, 3 immortal souls emanating an immense evil aura transformed into beams of light, attempting to flee. A crystal-clear phoenix cry rang out as the phoenix fire pouch rushed out from between Wu Qi's brows. A stream of purple and green heavenly flame descended from the sky, transforming into a wall of fire that wrapped around the 3 immortal souls. Wu Qi casually pointed his finger out, and the sword of greedy wolf flew out. Amidst a shrill wolf howl, it pierced through the 3 immortal souls and killed them completely. The purple and green divine flame burned ragingly, and before long, all 7 heaven immortals had been refined into blood and soul crystals. Quickly, he collected the storage rings of the 7 heaven immortals and looted everything of value from them. After that, Wu Qi walked excitedly to the center of the hall and fished out the glinting object from the bundle. It was indeed an energy-rotting ghost mushroom, a 5th-grade spirit herb in Scroll of Stealing. Combined with some other deadly poisons, it was more than enough to concoct an energy-rotting ghost mushroom that could even kill a gold immortal. The mushroom was about the size of a human head. It was pitch black, soft, and sticky like rotten flesh. It was heavy and probably weighed more than 50 kilograms. Several dozens of mycelium as thick as mung beans grew out of its body, with several dozens of mushroom caps the size of any mushrooms hanging from them. The mushroom caps had facial features that looked like those of a human being, but they were twisted and looked extremely ugly and ferocious. Indistinctly, shrill ghost howls could be heard coming from them. It is indeed an energy-rotting ghost mushroom, and one that has devoured the flesh and blood of at least 1 million living beings. Wu Qi breathed out a satisfied sigh. Carefully, he shoved the energy-rotting ghost mushroom into the black dragon spirit ring, then transferred all the medicinal herbs found in the 7 storage bags on the floor to himself. Grinning mockingly, Wu Qi realized that he had suddenly gotten used to the unspoken rule of Qing Su Immortal Pass. To put it bluntly, the one with the bigger fist was the king, and there were no rules at all. Initially, he was planning to spend a huge sum of energy stones and snatch the energy-rotting ghost mushroom from his gold core brother. But, since the old rule of the green-skinned Taoist and the other old Taoists was still in place, why didn't he learn from them and snatch it directly? The energy-rotting ghost mushroom was one of the items that Wu Qi wanted to buy in Qing Su Immortal Pass. Initially, Wu Qi wanted to buy the energy-rotting ghost mushroom, which was more bizarre and unpredictable than the energy-rotting ghost mushroom, as well as a few other poisonous plants. But, this kind of deadly poison was extremely rare, and he might not be able to find it. Wu Qi felt that he was very lucky to be able to find an energy-rotting ghost mushroom in such a short period of time. But, the garrison medallion of Qing Su Immortal Pass is really just a decoration. Wu Qi laughed mockingly as he retracted the 4 celestial fiend puppets, opened the door and walked out lazily. The commotion caused by the murder and robbery was so intense, yet no one came to investigate. The garrison medallion of Qing Su Immortal Pass had really neglected its duty. Upon stepping out of the main entrance of Myriad Herbs Hall, Wu Qi's expression changed abruptly. He suddenly realized why no one had discovered the unusual change in Myriad Herbs Hall. The sky had turned grayish, and 2 mysterious, scarlet eyeballs were hovering in midair, staring straight at Wu Qi. Under the ground was a vast, sticky, yellow ocean, which was emitting a pungent, fishy smell. The grayish sky and the yellow ocean formed a spherical space that measured 100 miles in diameter, trapping the entire Myriad Herbs Hall within it. A man and a woman were standing quietly on the yellow ocean, staring at Wu Qi with a smile on their faces. Wu Qi halted his steps, lowered his head to look at the yellow ocean under his feet, and said in a deep voice, "The legendary water of the Yellow Spring?" The man laughed and said softly, "It's just an imitation, not the real thing. But, if a heaven immortal accidentally bumps into it, even if he doesn't die, he will at least lose a piece of skin." "Cut the crap," said the woman straightforwardly. "Hand over the energy-rotting ghost mushroom and the benefits you just obtained, as well as all your belongings. We saw Patriarch Greenheart and a few other dead men enter Myriad Herbs Hall with you, and we've worked hard to deploy the illusory realm outside to buy you some time. Even if we don't have any credit, we can still thank you for your hard work. Hand over all your valuables, and we'll spare your life." Wu Qi laughed dryly and said, "Fellow Taoists, what are you trying to do? A robbery?" The woman nodded seriously and said, "That's right. You've been robbing others in Myriad Herbs Hall, and now, you're the only one who walked out alone. Now, we, husband and wife, are robbing you. This is a matter of course. Cut the crap, our illusory realm can only hold you for a quarter of an hour at most. Quickly hand over all your valuables, and we won't go too far. We'll spare your life, so that we can meet again in the future." For a moment, Wu Qi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had just robbed a group of people, and now, he was robbed as soon as he walked out. This was truly a retribution from the heavens. Seeing that Wu Qi didn't move for a long while, the woman couldn't help but widen her eyes and raise her eyebrows. Then, she pointed her finger at the 2 huge eyeballs in the sky. The 2 scarlet eyeballs spun abruptly, and a large amount of sticky blood sprayed out from them, splashing towards Wu Qi along with a pungent smell. Chapter 451. The blood that sprayed down from the top of his head had a pungent stench. Even from a great distance away, Wu Qi could feel a scorching heat coming from it, which made his skin hurt. The blood was not a good material, so Wu Qi dared not to touch it. Without hesitation, he pointed his finger out and threw out a palm-sized, golden-yellow jade medallion carved into the shape of a rhinoceros, which he snatched from Lord Jade. It transformed into a beam of golden light and flew out. A deep roar of a rhinoceros rang out, as a 90 feet long, stout and muscular single-horned rhinoceros appeared above Wu Qi's head. The rhinoceros licked its lips and lowered its head to look at Wu Qi. After that, it widened its eyes and breathed out a stream of white mist towards the sky. A strong gale was kicked up from all directions, and nearly 100 whirlwinds with goat horns emerged from the ground, reaching into the sky like ghost claws that stretched out from hell. The whirlwinds collided with the blood. The thick and sticky blood was rolled up by the whirlwinds, turning into countless thumb-sized, blood-red water droplets that shot all over the sky. Wu Qi didn't care what the rhinoceros was going to do. He opened his mouth and sprayed out a stream of innate energies of 5 elements onto the rhinoceros's body. The rhinoceros threw its head back and roared joyfully into the sky as if it was in heat. Then, the several dozens of whirlwinds suddenly converged and transformed into a pitch-black whirlwind, about 70 to 80 feet long. It rolled up all the water droplets and shot towards the man and woman. The black whirlwind produced a long, sharp, and unpleasant whistling sound, like the screams of countless malicious spirits. It tore the air apart, leaving dozens of glaring black halos, and suddenly arrived in front of the man and woman. The man screamed in fear. His long robe exploded abruptly, transforming into countless thumb-sized, white strips that shot out in all directions. Within a blink of an eye, they weaved into a huge cloth net, firmly blocking the whirlwind. The diameter of the cloth net was about 1 mile, and its surface was densely covered with the shapes of faint, blood-red eyes. These eyes flashed with a strange evil light from time to time, and their entire bodies were filled with an unsettling evil aura. The whirlwind, along with the blood-colored water droplets, fell heavily on the cloth net. Only an ear-piercing sound could be heard, as if a basin of cold water had been poured into a pot of hot oil. The cloth strips on the cloth net spewed out unpleasant black smoke. The whirlwind disappeared, and the blood droplets were also sucked into the cloth net. The scarlet-red eyes on the cloth strips suddenly deepened. The woman glanced at Wu Qi in surprise. She nodded in a very reserved manner and said with a smile, "You do have some ability." "Yes." Giggling, the woman pointed at Wu Qi and said, "Generally speaking, the strongest immortals have abundant energy essence. I'm Lady Myriad Miao, a well-known good person in Qing Su Immortal Pass. If this fellow Taoist is willing to donate some of his primordial yang, I won't be willing to destroy a flower." Wu Qi gave Lady Myriad Miao a look of astonishment, then pointed at the man and said with a wry smile, "Isn't he your husband?" The man smiled as usual. Shaking his head, he said, "Wan Miao is my beloved wife." "But, what does that have to do with you? It's your fortune that she has taken a fancy to you. You just need to donate some of your primordial yang, hand over the energy-rotting ghost mushroom and the herbs you found in Myriad Herbs Hall, and we'll let you leave safely." Blinking his eyes, Wu Qi shook his head and thought, this couple is really one of a kind. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi fished out about 1/2 kilogram of drunken dragon incense powder. Casually, he sprinkled a handful of it into the air, then snapped, "An ugly woman like you wants to take advantage of me? Do you think you, that guy? Have a taste of my bone-rotting ghost fire." He pointed his finger out and unleashed a stream of true flame. The drunken dragon incense powder that filled the air was ignited instantly, transforming into countless sparks that rushed towards the man and woman. The air was filled with a delicate fragrance, and the sparks were swirling about, giving off the smell of phosphorescence. When Lady Myriad Miao saw that Wu Qi did not respond to her suggestion, it was as if Wu Qi had just trampled on her dignity as a woman. She was so angry that she let out a shrill howl. Suddenly, her long hair stood straight up, and her body transformed into a pale green, half-transparent ghost, charging towards Wu Qi amidst countless ghost flames. She laughed harshly and said, "Phosphorescence? Is there any phosphorescence under the heaven that can hurt us, who are already ghosts?" Wu Qi's expression flickered abruptly. This Lady Myriad Miao was actually a ghost immortal cultivated from a ghost spirit. Different from the heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm, ghost immortals cultivated from incorporeal ghosts. Ghost immortals cultivated by drawing nether energy into their bodies. Their cultivation techniques were unpredictable, and they were famous for their danger, strangeness, fierceness, and strangeness. They were experts in hurting the souls of immortal cultivators, and their curses were impossible to guard against. They were especially good at using poisons. To other immortals, the energy-rotting ghost mushroom was a deadly poison, but to ghost immortals, it was just like the Ganoderma horse, a supreme spirit herb that could improve their cultivation base and strengthen their ghost bodies. No wonder this couple was blocking the entrance of Myriad Herbs Hall, determined to rob the energy-rotting ghost mushroom. Wu Qi snorted coldly, fixing his gaze at Lady Myriad Miao, who was charging towards him. When she was about 1 mile away from him, Wuqi pointed his finger out, unleashing a fist-sized ball of purple and green flame, shooting towards Lady Myriad Meow like a bolt of lightning. Lady Myriad Meow had just flown past the burning drunken dragon incense powder, and her body was not harmed at all. She thought that Wuqi was nothing special, and did not even spare a glance at the ball of divine flame of order that flew out from Wuqi's hand. When the innate divine flame was not activated, its power was extremely restrained, as all its magical power was hidden in its core. Even when one used their divine will to scan through it, they would not be able to sense its frightening power. Lady Myriad Meow had never seen such an innate supreme treasure before. With a hideous smile on her face, as if she had the power to decide life and death, she plunged straight into the ball of divine flame of order like a moth flying into a flame. Poor Lady Myriad Meow, a ghost immortal with a cultivation base of nearly 31st tier, was completely restrained by the divine flame of order. The divine flame of order was the nemesis of all fiends and ghosts, and the natural enemy of all pure spiritual entities. As ghost immortals were cultivated from ghosts, their immortal bodies were different from ordinary heaven immortals, as their bodies were formed from the combination of nether energy and their own soul will. A miserable howl echoed out as Lady Myriad Meow's body burst into flames, dancing wildly in the air like an extra-large torch. The divine flame of order clung to her body and burned to its heart's content, then seeped into her body through her 7 apertures, causing dark smoke to billow out from her body. Numerous purple crystals the size of fists kept bursting out from her body. They were the soul crystals formed from the enormous soul will she had cultivated painstakingly for countless years. The man was struck dumb. He stared blankly at Lady Myriad Meow, who was shrouded in the purple and green divine flame, and screamed, "What the hell is this?" "You don't need to know," Wuqi said coolly. "A ghost immortal?" "Hee, the thing I fear the least is a ghost immortal." A bird cry rang out as the immortal sword given to Wuqi by Daoist Yun Zhang shot out amidst a sheet of flame. When the immortal sword flew out, the flame condensed into a large bird that looked like a phoenix. The flame flickered, and Lady Myriad Meow, who was severely wounded by the divine flame of order, was killed by the immortal sword without any ability to resist. Drop by drop, her enormous soul will essence was purified and refined by the divine flame of order. Eventually, Wuqi obtained over 3,000 fist-sized soul pearls. With a flick of his sleeve, the soul pearls transformed into a purple beam of light and were put away by Wuqi, together with the storage ring left behind by Lady Myriad Meow. With the immortal sword in hand, the single-horned rhino hovering above Wuqi threw its head back and let out a long roar. Pointing at the man, he cried out sternly, "Now, I'll rob you. Leave behind all your valuables, and I'll spare your life." The man took a few steps back in terror. Lady Myriad Meow was his partner, and she had always been the one in charge of their actions, as her cultivation base was 4 tiers higher than the man. The man was merely a peak 35th tier cultivator, and with the drunken dragon incense lingering in the air, his cultivation base had been greatly weakened, leaving him with a cultivation base of 36th tier. Holding the immortal sword, Wuqi approached step by step with a hideous smile on his face. He pointed at the yellow ocean down below and said, "An imitation of the water of Yellow Spring? This treasure is not bad, I want it too. Leave behind all your valuables, and I'll leave you with a pair of underpants to take you home." "Ha, hurry up and hand over all your valuables, or I won't even leave you with a pair of underpants." The man looked around in panic for a while. All of a sudden, he roared out, "Wan Miao is dead. What's the point of me being alive? Let's fight, let's fight. Can you kill my infinite incarnations?" The man's clothes ripped apart at the same time, revealing his body. Wuqi let out a strange cry with fright, then quickly retreated far away. This man's facial features were extremely good. He was also a pretty boy, and he was handsome and romantic. However, the rest of his body below the neck was in a terrible state. His flesh was rotten to the point where white bones could be seen everywhere. His body was rotten to the point where shredded flesh and minced meat could be seen everywhere. Countless thumb-sized maggots were crawling in and out of his rotten flesh and bones. However, They were covered in a thick layer of black carapace, and their bellies were covered with black hair. "What the hell is this?" Wu Qi cried out in fear. Throughout his life of cultivation, Wu Qi had never thought that a heaven immortal cultivator could have such a horrible appearance. Not only was the man's body rotten, he was also emitting a foul stench. Even from afar, the stench made Wu Qi burst into tears. "Bone rotting and burying worms." The man laughed ferociously and said, "These are Wan Miao's favorite bone rotting and burying worms. For her sake, I destroyed my own immortal body, using my heaven immortal body to transform into a nest of worms, raising 3,600 of them for Wan Miao. Hee. These are the bone rotting and burying worms that can devour gold immortals when they finally mature." Waving both arms, the man cried out sternly, "My boys, kill him and eat him. Wan Miao, I'll avenge you." Bone rotting and burying worms? Immediately, Wu Qi recalled some records about bone rotting and burying worms found in Scroll of Stealing. Among all the countless venomous worms in the universe, they were frightening creatures that could be ranked in the top 100. In order to grow and evolve, these venomous worms had to constantly devour the flesh and blood of heaven immortals. If they did not eat fresh flesh and blood for 3 days in a row, they would immediately die. After devouring enough heaven immortals' blood essence, flesh and blood, they would spin a cocoon and evolve. They had to evolve 9 times in total. Once the number of bone-rotting and burying worms reached a certain level, they would have the overall strength to devour gold immortals. Most importantly, even the most basic larva, the feces of these worms, was an extremely venomous poison. If they were combined with the energy-rotting ghost mushroom and 5 other rare poisonous plants and insects as raw materials, they would be able to concoct the immortal banishing powder, which could kill even a mid-tier gold immortal in an instant. Buzz! A loud noise rang out, as 3,600 bone-rotting and burying worms darted out of the man's body like countless bullets. Densely packed together, they swarmed toward Wu Qi, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Wu Qi's face fell, and he retreated a few miles back. Chapter 452. The Black Dragon's Spirit Ring moved. The dragon head on the ring opened its mouth and spat out several dozens of palm-sized, golden-colored leaves that were emitting a pungent odor. The leaves were very thick, and the veins on them were very distinct. Each and every one of them formed a huge character, ghost, written in ancient seal script. It was the ghost pattern grass, a strange herb Wu Qi had collected on Myriad Immortals' planet. Clenching the ghost pattern grass tightly with both hands, he crushed it into powder. After that, Wu Qi bit the tip of his tongue and sprayed out a mouthful of blood, fusing it with the broken leaves of the ghost pattern grass. Upon contact with the blood, the golden-colored ghost pattern grass began to melt, turning into a clump of sticky, pale red liquid. The pungent odor was gone, replaced by a faint fragrance that could make one feel refreshed. Bone-rotting and burying bugs, what a good thing. Wu Qi's eyes shone brightly. With the liquid of ghost pattern grass sticking on his finger, he quickly wrote one large rune after another in the air. The liquid of ghost pattern grass was very sticky, and as it flowed in the air, it formed into twisted runes that were blinking with a blinding red gleam. When all 49 runes were written, Wu Qi pushed his palm on them and began to recite an incantation under his breath. Immediately, a grayish mist rose from the surroundings, and a chilly wind that brought countless twisted faces, crying and wailing, gathered towards the runes. In just a blink of an eye, the runes were covered with a thick layer of murderous aura of Yin ghosts. A towering aura soared into the sky, and those bone-rotting and burying bugs that were leaping towards Wu Qi were taken aback. Then, they rushed towards the runes as if they had gone mad. Like nibbling on mulberry leaves, these bone-rotting and burying bugs crazily devoured the runes transformed from the liquid of ghost pattern grass, devouring all the liquid that had fused with Wu Qi's blood essence and all the murderous aura of Yin ghosts. Wu Qi stared at the stunned man in front of him, smiled and said, "Actually, it is not necessary to feed these bone-rotting and burying bugs with the flesh and blood of heaven immortals." Although the bone-rotting corpse insects raised this way had a stronger evil aura and greater lethality. However, if we only need their excrement to concoct various poisons, then if we feed them with ghost pattern grass, ghost face flower, and weeping ghost mushroom mixed with their own blood essence, the toxicity of their excrement will be several times stronger. You. The man trembled as he pointed at Wu Qi, his mind completely blank. After a long time, the man shouted at the top of his lungs, "Impossible, these are bone-corroding and undead insects that I raised with my blood essence, they should only listen to my orders." Idiot! Wu Qi sneered and shook his head. How can you heaven immortals who practice evil cultivation techniques know the secret of such a vicious thing as bone-rotting and undead worms? If not for Princess Zhanglu inheriting the bloodline of an ancient heaven god from her mother, from which she obtained countless inheritances of evil ghost techniques, how could Wu Qi know the method of feeding bone-rotting and undead insects with ghost-pattern grass and some other poisonous things? After feeding them with the flesh and blood of heaven immortals, after spinning the cocoon for 9 times, they would give birth to a matured bone-rotting and undead insect king, which possessed a frightening strength that could devour gold immortals. However, after carefully feeding them with various poisonous things mixed with their own blood essence, after spinning the cocoon for 9 times, they would give birth to a myriad poison-venomous insect king, which could kill a gold immortal with just a mouthful of its saliva. It was a truly vicious thing. If the bone-rotting and undead insect king was driven to fight against a gold immortal, and if that gold immortal had some supreme treasure with pure yang element, the bone-rotting and undead insect king would be smashed to pieces. But, as long as the myriad poison-venomous insect king had a clever technique, it could produce an endless stream of deadly poison, and how many immortals could it kill? Looking at the hysterical man, Wu Qi was too lazy to discuss these profound questions with him. For shadowy figures rushed out of his body. For celestial fiend puppets flew whistling out, charging towards the man who had fallen into madness. For fiend figures wheeled around the man, and in the blink of an eye, his body was smashed into a pile of broken bones and rotten flesh. Just when a bloody immortal soul rushed out from his body, it was devoured by the 4 celestial fiend puppets. Wu Qi shook his head as he stared coldly at the man's flesh and blood drifting in the air. The man's appearance was so disgusting that Wu Qi did not even have the thought to refine him into a blood crystal or soul crystal. Thus, he decided to let the celestial fiend puppets share him. With a light shake of his fingers, streams of runes emanating an eerie aura were cast out. Using the technique taught to him by Princess Zhanglu, Wu Qi sent a thread of his divine will into each of the 3,600 bone-rotting and undead bugs, firmly controlling their limited intelligence, which was left with only a tiny bit of instinct to devour and avariciousness. Wu Qi took out a spirit breeding ring, which had an internal space of only the size of a water tank. Using all the materials he obtained from Myriad Immortals' planet, he expanded it to the size of 10 acres. After that, he threw in a large pile of energy stones to replenish the energy in the internal space, as well as several tens of thousands of kilograms of poisonous herbs and animals he found on Myriad Immortals' planet. After that, he ordered all the bone-rotting and undead bugs to crawl into the spirit breeding ring and settle down inside. Bone-rotting and undead bugs were too vicious. Even though they were larvae that had not spun their cocoons yet, Wu Qi dared not to put them together with longbow people. Those longbow people were careless, and if they accidentally bumped into these bugs, even though Wu Qi had controlled their intelligence, their poisonous hair could still kill these longbow people who were merely at Jin Dan realm. He hung the spirit breeding ring in front of his chest, turned his head around and gave his surroundings a glance. He retracted the single-horned rhino, pointed his finger out and took out the dark Yin energy vase. As soon as the vase was taken out, the imitation of the yellow spring under his feet began to vibrate violently. Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture, and the vase immediately shot out a beam of green light. A vast expanse of yellow ocean rolled up and slowly condensed into 3 thumb-sized, translucent drops of yellow liquid at the mouth of the vase. It was the true form of the yellow ocean. It was a vicious thing that Goddess Wan Miao had concocted by gathering countless acquired poisonous creatures and a huge amount of death aura from ancient tombs, fusing with countless deadly poisons from rotting corpses, and using the 3 drops of true water of transformation that she found by chance. But, she only had 3 drops of true water of transformation. Therefore, although the yellow spring was vicious, its power was not too great. It could threaten lower-tier heaven immortals, but it would be useless against immortal items with stronger defense. But, I have as much true water of transformation as I want. After identifying the essence of the 3 drops of yellow spring with his divine will, Wu Qi smiled delightfully. After shoving a pile of water element energy stones into the vase, Wu Qi changed the incantation gesture and produced several tens of kilograms of true water of transformation, fusing it with the 3 drops of yellow spring. Drops of clear spring water flew out from the mouth of the vase and slowly fused with the 3 drops of yellow spring water. Slowly, the volume of the yellow spring water grew larger, and its color turned fainter. But, as time went by, the yellow color grew stronger. Very good. This goddess Wan Miao is pretty good at concocting poisons. What she concocted is actually a living poison. As long as the true water of transformation is added, the yellow spring water will grow endlessly. This is indeed a good stuff. Wu Qi looked pleasantly at the clump of yellow spring water, which was the size of a water tank, on the mouth of the vase. He nodded his head and said, I can't use too much of this thing, or it will ruin my reputation. In the future, I will slowly fuse all kinds of deadly poisons into it, and slowly accumulate the true water of transformation, making it stronger and stronger. In the end, when I unleash it, it will turn into a vast ocean, and even a gold immortal will have to knock him out for a few times. Laughing complacently, Wu Qi kept the clump of yellow spring water into the dark yin energy vase. After that, he took a deep breath and changed his visage, retracting the 4 celestial fiend puppets into his body. After that, he broke the illusory barrier erected by goddess Wan Miao with a punch and walked out leisurely. Right after he walked out of the illusory barrier and arrived at Qing Su Immortal Square, Wu Qi was taken aback. There were no pedestrians on the street, and all the shops in the surroundings had their doors tightly shut. Only several dozens of heaven immortals could be seen standing on clouds, looking at him from afar. 100 flying ships, each about 200 feet long, were hovering quietly in the sky. 20,000 soldiers clad in soft armors were standing on the ships, pulling their bows and aiming at Wu Qi. A handsome young man, clad in a crimson battle robe with 100 flowers on the outside, was riding on the back of a single-horned ink qilin, with a 36-jointed steel whip hanging on his left hand. He was standing on the street outside Myriad Herbs Hall's main entrance, staring at Wu Qi. Upon seeing such a solemn and battle-ready stance, Wu Qi laughed dryly and said, What is the meaning of this, General? I'm Feng Qingya, the general who guards Qing Su Immortal Pass, the young general said coolly. I'm Feng Qingya, the general who guards Qing Su Immortal Pass. Just hand over the energy-rotting ghost mushroom and all the valuables you have, and let me whip you 3 times. If you survive, you can leave now. It suddenly dawned on Wu Qi that they were not the only people who came to this place after hearing the energy-rotting ghost mushrooms cry just now. And it seemed to him that Feng Qingya, the tiger sitting on the ground, was following behind goddess Wan Miao and her husband. Wu Qi laughed dryly, then turned to Feng Qingya and said, So, General Feng, you are trying to rob me? Feng Qingya chuckled. As a man, he was actually smiling in such a flirtatious manner, and was just short of throwing a flirtatious glance at Wu Qi. Waving the steel whip in his left hand, he said coolly, I'm not robbing you. I'm trying to maintain the order in Qing Su Immortal Pass. Of course, you can think that if you want. If you sell the energy-rotting ghost mushroom in the ghost realm, you can exchange it for tens of millions of energy stones, gold, silver, and gemstones. I've been spending quite a lot lately. Frowning, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, By doing this, General Feng, aren't you afraid that? Feng Qingya interrupted Wu Qi and snapped, Cut the crap. Don't talk nonsense about rules to me. Rules? In Qing Su Immortal Pass, my words are the rules. Laws? Every word I say is the law of Qing Su Immortal Pass. As long as your overall strength is not strong enough to scare me, I don't mind killing people and robbing them on the street. Pointing the steel whip at Wu Qi, Feng Qingya cried out sternly, My boys, the murder case of Myriad Herbs Hall. Over 3,800 innocent people were slaughtered by this guy. Capture him alive. I'm going to chop him into pieces to serve as an example to others. 4 soldiers on the flying ship answered with a loud voice. They put down the strong bows in their hands and leaped down from the sky 1,000 feet above the ground like fleas, pouncing towards Wu Qi. Although they did not sense any aura around them, nor did they possess any beast souls, they moved as fast as a gust of wind, not any slower than those nascent soul cultivators who were body cultivators. Wu Qi was taken aback by the speed of the 4 soldiers. With just a moment of carelessness, they had arrived before him, stretched out both hands and grabbed onto Wu Qi's limbs. Like iron hoops, their fingers gripped tightly onto Wu Qi's body. The 4 soldiers exhaled and yelled, then grabbed Wu Qi's limbs and pulled them out forcefully. They were not trying to capture Wu Qi alive. Instead, it was obvious that they were going to tear Wu Qi into pieces. How should he put it? With this iron plate, it at least proved that you had enough financial resources. You're merely a peak nascent soul stage cultivator, yet you're able to pay an additional fee of spirit stones. Your background and net worth are worthy of our attention. Wu Qi suddenly realized the mystery behind it, and he immediately cursed Feng Qingya in his mind. The complacent Feng Qingya could not hear the curses in Wu Qi's mind. This is an invention I invented after I came here. Any cultivator who comes to Qing Su Immortal Pass for the first time, and whose cultivation base is not strong, but whose expression does not change after being charged an extra fee of energy stones will be given an iron medallion like this. If it is a cultivator with a small net worth, but whose cultivation base is not strong. Hee hee. Wu Qi laughed as well. Staring at Feng Qingya, he said, they will disappear very soon, right? Feng Qingya shook his head and said smilingly, perhaps, but it has nothing to do with me. How should I put this? You cultivators are killing for money, and it has nothing to do with me. I'm just waiting for the dust to settle, and then I'll come and uphold justice. As he spoke, Feng Qingya's face suddenly turned cold. Pointing a finger at Wu Qi, he cried out sternly, boys, kill him. This man is a lunatic who has killed over 18,000 cultivators and prisoners around Myriad Herbs Hall. He has committed a heinous crime, and his crime is unforgivable. In accordance with the law of Diyu, I'll kill him on the spot. 100 soldiers on the 4 flying ships released their bowstrings at the same time. A muffled noise echoed out as 100 specially made bone-piercing wolf fang arrows transformed into specks of cold light that crossed several miles in just a blink of an eye, shooting straight towards all the vital parts of Wu Qi's body. These arrows were extremely accurate, fast, and ruthless, as they nearly hit all the vital parts of Wu Qi's body that were exposed to the outside world. Wu Qi dared not to recklessly test the power of these arrows. With a thought in his mind, he activated the defensive spirit item, green cicada wings, once again. Amidst the jarring chirping of cicadas, a large sheet of green light enveloped Wu Qi, while several dozens of green spirit cicadas wheeled around Wu Qi. A heavy pressure suddenly came pressing at him from all directions. When the arrows landed on the defensive green light, the cold light they emitted penetrated nearly 1 foot deep into the green light. Wu Qi watched helplessly as 100 arrows approached him from all directions. The speed of the arrows gradually slowed down, and when they were about 3 inches away from his body, their force was finally neutralized by the green cicada wings, causing them to fall powerlessly to the ground. Wonderful! This is an excellent defensive spirit item. Feng Qingya clapped his hands and cried out, it is at least a lower-grade spirit item. The price is 3,000 upper-grade energy stones. Is there anyone interested? Standing on a white cloud in the distance, a middle-aged Taoist with a fair face and no facial hair cried out in a deep voice, General Feng, this spirit item is full of spirituality, and its defensive strength is pretty good as well. I've recently taken in a few outer sect disciples, and I happen to lack some defensive items. 3,000 upper-grade energy stones is too expensive. 2,700, I'll take it. Feng Qingya raised his steel whip and drew a circle in the air complacently, then said smilingly, wonderful. 2,700 upper-grade energy stones. This spirit item belongs to this senior immortal. He pointed at Wu Qi smilingly and said, fellow Taoist greed, what other treasures do you have? Take them out now. After all, I have no use for these treasures, but the senior immortals who are waiting in the surroundings can use them. Wu Qi was so infuriated that his mouth twisted. Did this bastard think that his magical treasures were already in his possession? Wu Qi gave those heaven immortals who were watching the show a cold glance, and kept their faces firmly in his mind. So, Qingsu Immortal Pass was such a hellish place. There was no order at all, and it was a place where only the strong could win. In the memories of Shui Xin and Shui Yi, they seemed to think that this place was not bad. Perhaps it was because Green City was too powerful, and no one dared to offend them. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi glared at Feng Qingya and said coldly, General Feng, you even know my registered Taoist name? Pointing at the iron medallion in Wu Qi's palm, Feng Qingya said smilingly, with this, you'll know everything you need to know. With a casual pinch, Wu Qi turned the iron medallion into a drop of molten iron and fell to the ground. Shaking his head, he stamped his foot and unleashed a stream of yellow mist. He was about to flee with the escape art of earth. But, his body froze, and he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Suddenly, he realized that the ground here was paved with energy-repelling iron, which could isolate all natural energies from the surroundings. He dared not to reveal his innate escape art of earth in front of the crowd, so he used an ordinary escape art instead. The result was as if he had bumped his head into a wall, and the backlash from his energy made Wu Qi feel very uncomfortable. Feng Qingya laughed so hard that he nearly fell off the single-horned Qilin's back. The energy-repelling iron here is 1 mile deep, and you want to flee with the escape art of earth? Fellow Taoist greed, are you scared out of your wits? Ha ha ha. With a cold snort, Wu Qi's body flashed and he teleported away. But suddenly, a loud noise rang out. Wu Qi had just traveled less than 1 mile when a golden immortal talisman suddenly flew up into the sky, sprinkling down with a sheet of golden spirit light. The surrounding void was completely locked down, and with the strength of Wu Qi's current magic power, there was no way he could break through the spirit light sprinkled down by the immortal talisman. The space around him had solidified like an iron bucket, and Wu Qi was like an insect trapped in amber, unable to escape. The person who produced the immortal talisman was a middle-aged Taoist with a big beard. He smiled faintly and said, fellow Taoist, since you've come to Qingsu Immortal Pass, you'll have to follow the rules of Qingsu Immortal Pass. Either you tell me the background of your sect, or you show me a few decent immortal spells and divine abilities. Otherwise, hand over all your spirit items and leave. Feng Qingya clapped his hands and praised, Immortal Master, your timing is very timely. Wonderful. I'll give you a 95% discount on anything that Immortal Master has his eyes on today. All Immortal Masters, pay attention. Don't let this man escape. He has at least an energy-rotting ghost mushroom with him now. Even Patriarch Greenheart and the others were killed by Myriad Herb's Hall, so this man must have many good items with him. As his teleportation was forcibly interrupted, the energies in Wu Qi's body rebelled once again. After stabilizing his energies with great difficulty, Wu Qi could not help but get angry when he heard Feng Qingya's words. According to General Feng, as long as one possesses a sufficient overall strength, they will be able to do whatever they want in Qingsu Immortal Pass. Since I've killed Patriarch Greenheart, why are you still making things difficult for me? Feng Qingya blinked his eyes a few times, then rode up to Wu Qi and said smilingly, the problem is, no one saw if fellow Taoist Greed really killed Patriarch Greenheart with his own hands. Unless fellow Taoist Greed can show me your overall strength, so that I won't covet your treasures again, I hope fellow Taoist will hand over all your spirit items. Pointing at the 4 soldiers killed by Wu Qi just now, Feng Qingya said with a faint smile, 4 of my sons are dead. Fellow Taoist, you will have to pay for their bereavement. It has cost the Imperial Court of Dayu a great amount of financial and material resources to train them, so the cost can be considered as yours. After a brief calculation with his fingers, Feng Qingye smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, you can just compensate me with 1,000 upper-grade energy stones for my 4 sons. I'm not a man who goes too far." The group of several dozens of heaven immortals took a few steps closer to Wu Qi while smiling. Judging from the aura emanating from Wu Qi, he clearly possessed a cultivation base of peak-stage nascent soul realm. However, as a nascent soul cultivator was able to perform teleportation, Wu Qi's background must not be simple. Or, he simply had the help of a strange magic treasure on him, and it was the magic treasure that allowed him to display the magical power of teleportation. As magical treasures such as these were very rare, all the heaven immortals were tempted. The bearded Taoist, who had interrupted Wu Qi's teleportation with an immortal talisman, cried out sternly, "General Feng, stop wasting time. Just strike now. I don't care what his background is, let's join hands and strip him naked first." Feng Qingye smiled faintly as he swung the steel whip in his hand towards Wu Qi. He laughed and said, "You can't blame me for that. You can only blame your bad luck, fellow Taoist." The steel whip was piercingly cold. When Wu Qi scanned it with his divine will, his heart sank immediately. It did not have any fancy features, and there were no divine abilities or restrictive spells attached to it. It was just extremely tough and heavy. The weight of the 36 sections of the whip alone weighed 360,000 kilograms. On top of that, Feng Qingye's brute force was very strong. If an ordinary heaven immortal was hit by it, his immortal body would have his bones and tendons broken. This Qing Su immortal pass is really full of fucking robbers and bandits. Wu Qi roared furiously as a gray light shot out from the top of his head. It was the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. Chapter 454. The Earth Element Dragon's scale shield emitted several dozens of golden specks of light that blocked the steel whip. When the golden specks merged together, they formed a dragon scale-shaped shield. A loud bang rang out as the steel mace bounced back, and the golden dragon scale shield was shattered into pieces, turning into dozens of golden specks that shot straight toward Feng Qingye's chest. Feng Qingye shrieked with fear. His body tensed up abruptly, and he sprung up into the air like a giant grasshopper. Wu Qi grabbed the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag at the right time, injecting his energy into it without any reservation. He even bit his tongue and sprayed out a mouthful of blood essence onto the flag, causing it to emit a large sheet of misty gleam. Gripping the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, Ji Hao swung it fiercely and generated a series of cracking noise that sounded like a heavy rain. All human warriors and commanders on the 100 flying ships showed the whites of their eyes and fell off the ships in embarrassment. As human soldiers did not cultivate their nascent divinity and magical power, although their fleshly bodies were as strong as body cultivators, their souls were no different from mortals. Even an ordinary soul-searching magical treasure was enough to cause great harm to human soldiers, not to mention a powerful immortal artifact like the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. Unless someone like the great oracles of Yu Dynasty's Directorate of Celestials had laid down a powerful restrictive spell to protect the souls of human soldiers, any mystic technique that targeted at souls was more than enough to severely injure a human army in a flash. On the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, countless jade-like skulls roared together. Their shrill screams even shattered the souls of the 20,000 human warriors in the surroundings. Their broken souls transformed into streams of light, surging out from their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, then being absorbed by the flag. The flag shone brightly, emanating an enormous soul pressure that made all the living beings in Qing Su Immortal Square shiver and dare not to move. 20,000 soldiers were killed in an instant. Their bodies fell to the ground as they lost control of the bows in their hands, causing 20,000 arrows to fill the sky. Some of the arrows even went straight towards the dozens of heaven immortals standing on the clouds. Sheets of immortal light rushed out of their bodies, turning all the arrows into nothingness in just a flash. Strange whistling noises came from the soul-searching flag, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Among the several tens of heaven immortals, a dozen of them did not have a very high-grade defensive immortal item, and their cultivation base was just so. The strange whistling sound swept across, and their celestial artifacts suddenly dimmed. The artifact spirits of the celestial artifacts were shattered by the whistling sound. A stream of light rushed out from the immortal artifact. The artifact spirit's immortal soul was shattered and absorbed into the soul-searching flag. The heaven immortal, who had lost the protection of his immortal item, let out a cry of alarm and fell down from the cloud. Before these heaven immortals could fall to the ground, the spirit-restricting rope transformed into a beam of purple light and shot out. The dozens of heaven immortals who fell to the ground were tightly bound by the spirit-restricting rope. With a flick of his finger, these heaven immortals were sucked to the front of Wu Qi. Then, he waved the soul-searching flag, unleashing a layer of grayish mist that wrapped up the tens of heaven immortals. Shrill cries rang out as Wu Qi dared not to use the divine flame of order to refine their immortal souls and bodies in front of so many people. Therefore, he had no choice but to suck their immortal souls into the flag, which would be a great boon to the item spirit who was slumbering in the flag. Amidst a dark beam, the sword of greedy wolf shot out. 21 pitch-black wolf heads, each the size of a water tank, transformed into dark beams and spun wildly in the sky. The dark beams swept past the fallen human soldiers, turning them into a rain of blood and flesh that splashed in all directions. The rude and unreasonable behavior of Feng Qingya had greatly infuriated Wu Qi. However, he could not care less, and simply killed these human soldiers. Sword beams shot out and shredded the 20,000 human soldiers who fell from the sky in just a blink of an eye. The sword of greedy wolf spun around and came next to Wu Qi, easily piercing through the bodies of the dozens of heaven immortals. Their blood essence was completely absorbed by the sword, leaving not a single drop behind. The item spirit of the sword of greedy wolf let out a long and joyful cry. Wu Qi could clearly sense that the item spirit was growing at an incredible speed, and vaguely showed a sign of breaking through the realm of spirit immortal. Feng Qingya, who had just leaped up from the back of the single-horned Qilin, was hit by the strange cry of the soul-searching flag. His body turned stiff, and he could no longer move freely. Several dozens of dragon-scale-shaped golden beams shot out amidst ear-splitting whistling noises, piercing through his chest. His armor was extremely thick and heavy, possessing a very strong defensive strength. However, when faced with the dragon-scale-shaped golden beams mixed with innate earth element energy essence, the armor was easily pierced through, and a large hole was opened up on his chest. All his internal organs were shredded to pieces by the sharp energy carried by the dragon-scale-shaped golden beams. The fleshly body of the human general shattered, and his soul left his body immediately. Feng Qingya's soul was stronger than ordinary human soldiers, but there was a limit to it. The soul-searching flag rolled up and sucked Feng Qingya's soul into it, turning it into the nourishment for the slumbering item spirit to recover itself. Pressing his palm on Feng Qingya's corpse, Wu Qi uttered a disintegration spell. Abruptly, the corpse disintegrated, turning into the tiniest molecular structure and falling to the ground. A brocade bag fell down from the corpse. Wu Qi snatched it over, inside of which was a large pile of talismans made from bone fragments. Each talisman emanated a very powerful aura, and their power was not weaker than ordinary immortal talismans. All these talismans were recorded in the Tao of Ghost and Deity inherited by Princess Zhanglu. Wu Qi hastily identified the functions of these talismans. Some could attack, some could defend, and some could stabilize one's mind and soul. Among them were a dozen huge bone talismans the size of a door. Judging from the complicated rune arrays carved on them, they were powerful battle-grade talismans that could be used by several tens of thousands of soldiers. Fool! Wu Qi could not help but scold with a smile. With the protection of these strange bone talismans crafted by the great oracles of the human race, if Feng Qingya had taken precautions beforehand, even the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag would not be able to harm him. If he had used one or two of these huge bone talismans beforehand, the overall strength of these 20,000 human soldiers would have been improved by at least 10 times. When faced with 20,000 nascent soul-body cultivators whose overall strength had been improved by 10 times, even a true heaven immortal would be terrified. On top of that, with the magical power of stabilizing one's mind and soul, Wu Qi estimated the power of these bone talismans. Once these huge bone talismans were used on these 20,000 human soldiers, perhaps even the soul-searching flag would not be able to take away their souls. Feng Qingya had only been thinking about robbing, and had set off without any preparation. You think robbing people was too easy for you? Do you really think no one dares to attack you? Wu Qi sneered mockingly, then suddenly raised his head to look at those heaven immortals who were struggling to resist the power of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. A strange long cry rang out, as the single-horned qilin mounted by Feng Qingya gave a furious roar and thrust its horn straight towards Wu Qi's chest. How presumptuous! Wu Qi bellowed furiously. You look like a qilin, but you only have a single horn. I wonder where you came from. Are you going to risk your life for this Feng Qingya? The gold ingot, which he had just refined and purified with the spirit light of immortal transformation, flew out of his hand, transforming into a huge ball of golden light and smashing onto the single-horned qilin's nose. A crisp thud rang out. The qilin's face was dented by the gold ingot, and half of its head was smashed into pieces of bone and flesh. Qilin was a divine beast of heaven and earth. Even though it was a mixed-blood descendant, its life force was extremely tenacious. The single-horned qilin gave a miserable howl. Suddenly, a large plume of dark smoke rushed out from under its feet, carrying it as it spun and fled. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. The spirit-restricting rope flew out and bound the big fellow tightly. A large sheet of white light burst out from the spirit-breathing ring on his chest, enveloping the single-horned qilin and slowly dragging it into the ring. Sending a thread of divine will into the ring, Wu Qi cried out coldly, Long Yuan, take good care of him and make him behave. I still owe him a mount. Heal him if he is obedient. Beat him to death if he is not obedient. Long Yuan's muffled roar could be vaguely heard, followed by the miserable howl of the single-horned qilin. After deactivating the spirit-breathing ring, Wu Qi looked at those heaven immortals, whose faces had turned pale, and said with a cold grin, All of you have taken a fancy to my magical treasures. At the moment, 21 pitch-black wolf heads were wheeling around Wu Qi at high speed, while the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag above his head was emanating a large sheet of gray smoke and evil aura. Strange, shrill howls were deafening, making one's ears hurt and unable to stand steadily. All of a sudden, a plume of dark smoke rushed out from under Wu Qi's feet, and a beam of dark light shot up into the sky from the top of his head. His fake nascent soul, which cultivated the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, flew out of his body, roaring and releasing a dense fiend aura that blanketed the entire Qing Su immortal square in just a blink of an eye. Damn it, a fiend cultivator. The faces of those heaven immortals, who were struggling bitterly under the frightening power of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, fell instantly. Wu Qi had brazenly killed 20,000 captains and generals of the human race, as well as Feng Qingya, the general who guarded Qing Su immortal pass of Yu dynasty. He was decisive and ruthless, and now, he had revealed his nascent fiend. All the heaven immortals firmly believed that Wu Qi was indeed a cultivator from the Fiend League. As a fiend immortal who dared to openly attack a general of Yu dynasty like Wu Qi, it was obvious that he had a very strong backer. These heaven immortals were filled with regret. Why did they provoke such a fiend cultivator? It was fine if they joined hands to rob and bully ordinary heaven immortals and cultivators, but it was definitely not a good idea to get entangled with a fiend immortal, who was famous for seeking revenge for the smallest grievance. Laughing bitterly, the bearded Taoist who had interrupted Wu Qi's teleportation with an immortal talisman just now roared, Fellow Taoist, we are in the wrong today. Please don't take it to heart, fellow Taoist. The culprit, Feng Qingya, is already dead. Why do you still want to make things difficult for us? Why don't we just let this matter go, and we'll keep our mouths shut and never reveal your background? Wu Qi gave a cold snort. A few vague fiend shadows could be vaguely seen around him. He flew towards those heaven immortals and cried out harshly, How can you let me off so easily? You guys beat me and kill me as you please, and then leave as soon as you're done. Where's the face of this immortal? With a cold snort, Wu Qi said proudly, Cut the crap. Each of you, give me 1 immortal item, 3 spirit items, 9 magical treasures, 1 million lower-grade energy stones, and 10 million gold, silver, and jewelry. Then, Lao Tzu will let you go. So, Qing Su Immortal Pass was an unreasonable place. Since that was the case, Wu Qi did not plan to reason with these people. Do you like to say that the one with the bigger fist is always right? Well, since Wu Qi's fist is the strongest right now, you better hand over your money and buy your lives. Looking at the bearded Taoist, Wu Qi smiled and nodded. Then, he suddenly opened his mouth and shot out a stream of flame that looked like a shooting star. Attached with all the innate fire energy in Wu Qi's body, the acquired fire spirit pearl shot out like a small sun and smashed right into the Taoist's chest. A loud boom rang out, and a heatwave rolled and rocked. The Taoist's defensive immortal item was smashed to pieces, and half of his body was burned to ashes by the heatwave. Seeing this, Chi-Chi's expression flickered. 60% of them spun and fled into the distance in beams of light, while the remaining 40% attacked together with Chi-Chi. Dozens of flying swords and magical treasures came smashing down towards Wu Qi's head at the same time. Chapter 455. Kill. Wu Qi let out a long cry as he waved the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag with all his might. A shrill, unpleasant ghost howl towered into the sky. The dozens of immortal swords and magical treasures that were about to reach Wu Qi's head suddenly froze and dimmed, while their power was weakened by at least 30%. Countless golden dragon scales shot out of Wu Qi's left hand, transforming into a huge golden light screen that shielded Wu Qi. The dozens of immortal items kept falling down and smashing against the golden dragon scales, sending sparks flying in all directions. But, no matter how hard they tried, they could not break the protection of the dragon scales. The quality of the scales left behind by the 25th tier snow-armored heaven-devouring python when it transcended its heavenly tribulation was comparable to a 25th tier immortal item. Among all the heaven immortals present, the strongest one was only a 33rd tier cultivator, and the strongest immortal item was only a 29th tier immortal item. So, how could they possibly break the incredible defense of the earth element dragon scale shield? Wu Qi laughed wildly as he bit his tongue, causing a large chunk of flesh to fall off the tip of his tongue. He coughed out mouthfuls of blood essence, which splashed onto the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag and made the countless jade skulls on the flag grit their teeth and scream. An immense evil aura blanketed the entire Qing Su Immortal Square. Wu Qi's nascent fiend performed a reverse lotus incantation gesture, unleashing a great sheet of fiend flame that swept out in all directions together with the frightening cries of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. The bodies of those fleeing heaven immortals swayed as their immortal items exploded, and they fell to the ground at the same time. The spirit-restricting rope shot out like a great python, wrapping around the fallen heaven immortals and dragging them back. Some heaven immortals still had the strength to fight back. They had already landed on the ground, but still unleashed their immortal items to defend against the purple light beam. Wu Qi sneered as his erect eye suddenly opened. The pupil transformed from the cold electric mirror shot out a large sheet of silver-purple thunderbolts, which streaked across the sky soundlessly like a storm that covered 1,000 miles. All the raindrops gathered on one man, and the continuous and dense thunderbolts gave those heaven immortals a great pain. Blinding flashes kept bursting from their defensive immortal items, and in just a blink of an eye, the defensive immortal outfits of a few heaven immortals were broken. When the lightning struck the bodies of those heaven immortals, their flesh and blood flew everywhere, and their immortal souls nearly burst out of their bodies. With an ear-piercing whistle, the spirit-restricting rope bound these heaven immortals tightly and dragged them to Wu Qi's side, where he threw them into the spirit-breeding ring one by one. Kill! Wu Qi once again let out a resounding battle cry. The acquired earth, water, wood, and gold spirit pearls turned into 4 beams of intense light and shot out. Together with the fire spirit pearl that was shot out earlier, they turned into 5 beams of intense light that shot out in all directions. The heaven immortal, who was the first to bid for Wu Qi's defensive spirit item, the green cicada wings, cried out in shock. 5 acquired spirit pearls had locked onto his body at the same time, making him the first target of the fusion of 5 elements. The Heaven Immortal performed an incantation gesture with both hands and was about to unleash a life-saving spell. But, the 5 acquired spirit pearls did not give him any chance to do so. Like a mighty thunderbolt, they smashed viciously onto his body, shattering his defensive immortal item and turning his body into countless pieces of flesh and blood. A golden immortal soul soared up into the sky, about to flee. Wu Qi gave a cold snort and made a grabbing gesture with his left hand. A huge hand shrouded in dark smoke and dark fiend flame appeared out of nowhere, grabbing the immortal soul. Wu Qi laughed hideously. A large sheet of dark fiend gleam rose from the palm formed from a thread of his nascent divinity mixed with a great amount of inferno hell fiend energy, forcibly refining the immortal soul into numerous soul crystals. To Wu Qi's surprise, the soul crystals concocted with the soul-seizing technique found in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture contained a much stronger soul energy than those concocted with the divine flame of order, and they also contained a part of the great Tao of heaven and earth comprehended by that heaven immortal. Wu Qi laughed delightedly and said, "It is indeed a good technique. Hee, how many energy stones is this soul crystal worth?" With a fiend gleam flashing in his eyes, Wu Qi snorted ferociously at the remaining Heaven Immortals. The Heaven Immortals saw Wu Qi was protected by the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield, which several dozens of immortal swords and items could not break through his defense, and the mighty power of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, which nearly knocked them to the ground with just a wave. He also had the spirit-restricting rope, sword of greedy wolf, and many other powerful magical treasures. On top of that, his cultivation base was extremely strange. Although he was only a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator, he actually had the power to fight against a Heaven Immortal. Who would dare to provoke such a strange character? Who would be willing to do so? With a loud cry, the Heaven Immortals staggered and fled for their lives. When the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag was waved with all its might, not only were their immortal item spirits shaken, even their own immortal souls were badly shaken. If not because Wu Qi had focused most of his power on those Heaven Immortals who had fled far away, these Heaven Immortals would have been captured alive by Wu Qi. Seeing that they were about to flee, Wu Qi grinned hideously, quickly fished out a few spirit pills to replenish his energy, and swallowed them. When his energy was slightly restored, he raised the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag and waved it with all his might. The Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield produced a shrill whistling noise as 36,000 golden scales shot out along with ear-splitting whistling noises. Each of the fleeing Heaven Immortals was hit by several thousand golden scales. With a tremendous force, the countless golden scales smashed onto the bodies of those Heaven Immortals, causing them to tremble violently and lose their footing, making it impossible for them to maintain a stable path of escape. All the offensive magical treasures carried by Wu Qi had been unleashed. Apart from a few powerful items that he could not use, all the other magical treasures, whether they were spirit items or immortal items, transformed into colorful beams and shot out. Miserable howls rang out from all directions. One after another, these Heaven Immortals had their defensive immortal energy broken, and their immortal energies sealed by the spirit-restricting rope. Then, they were dragged back in a sorry state by Wu Qi. The rules of Qing Su Immortal Pass. When these fleeing Heaven Immortals were brought back, Wu Qi gave them a round of brutal stomps on their faces. As long as your fist is big and tough enough, you can do whatever you want in Qing Su Immortal Pass, am I right? Am I right? Ah. You are all Heaven Immortals with strong cultivation bases, so you can do whatever you want. Am I right? Brutally, he ripped off all the storage rings, bracelets, and belts from these Heaven Immortals. 2 female Heaven Immortals even had a pair of extremely rare anklets of storage. Although there were not many items in these anklets of storage, every single one of them was of the finest quality. There were over 230 immortal stones in them, which was really out of Wu Qi's expectation. Laughing wildly, Wu Qi put away all the spoils of war. Then, he neatly extracted the immortal souls of these Heaven Immortals and refined them into blood and soul crystals. Just like what he did just now, the quality of the blood and soul crystals refined with Inferno Hell Fiend Flame was a few times better than those refined with Divine Flame of Order. After all, the divine flame of order was a righteous innate divine flame, and it did not have a very strong effect when it came to killing and plundering. On the other hand, the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, as its name suggested, was not a good technique. It was very easy to kill people and seize their energy essence and soul, and it was the job of the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture. After ransacking all the heaven immortals who were taken into the spirit breeding ring just now, he chose the one with the highest cultivation base and possessed him with a celestial fiend puppet. After robbing his memories, Wu Qi refined all the heaven immortals into blood and soul crystals. Among the storage magical treasures of these heaven immortals, Wu Qi found the maps of over 300 provinces of Deyu dynasty, some of which were marked with various symbols, such as what kind of special products could be found in each province, and which officials were easier to get along with. Wu Qi could not help but feel overjoyed. If he were to collect all the maps of over 300 provinces by himself, how much effort would it take? The immortals and cultivators in Qing Su Immortal Square came from all over the place. It seemed like Qing Su Immortal Pass only covered over 300 provinces. He tidied up all the items and shoved them into the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, then let it devour all the storage magical treasures, expanding its storage space once again. The Black Dragon item spirit happily revealed his true form on the ring, sticking out his tongue at Wu Qi complacently, then flew back into the ring and began to digest today's harvest comfortably. Wu Qi laughed hideously, throwing his head back and saying, "So, this is the rule of Qing Su Immortal Pass. The one with the biggest fist is the boss." The erect eye on his forehead opened, shooting out several hundred thunderbolts that turned several hundred lofty mountains around Qing Su Immortal Square into ashes. Wu Qi threw his head back and cried out sternly, "Now, listen up, everyone in Qing Su Immortal Square. I've killed Feng Qingya and several dozens of heaven immortals, so I don't mind killing a few more. If you want to live, hand over all your money and belongings." Ha ha ha. Laughing wildly, Wu Qi exercised the heavenly law's embodiment divine ability of the heavenly dragon transformation, growing his body to 100 feet tall. 2 streams of white smoke sprayed out of his nostrils as he extended both hands and grabbed towards Qing Su Immortal Square, which stretched for nearly 100 miles. A deafening rumble rang out as all the roof tiles of several tens of thousands of houses and buildings in Qing Su Immortal Square were lifted up into the sky, while some houses that were not as sturdy were directly lifted up into the sky, revealing countless cultivators and mortals who were dumbstruck. When Wu Qi exercised the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag just now, he had carefully avoided any impact on the ground. Therefore, apart from some unlucky fellows, the rest of the people in Qing Su Immortal Square were safe and sound. They were just stunned by Wu Qi's massacre just now. Chapter 456. Very quickly, the golden Buddhist light rushed before Wu Qi. A sandalwood aroma wafted into his face, soothing and calming his mind. The aroma was simple and elegant, yet it did not disperse. It was as warm as a clear spring in the woods, and it made one feel a slight coolness from head to toe. It was a sandalwood of the finest grade, refined by the Dharma. Amidst the golden light, a monk, standing 12 feet tall and with fair skin, was seen putting his palms together and bowing to Wu Qi with a smile. He was wearing a yellow kasaya, a pair of boots made of tiny pearls, and a Buddhist crown inlaid with jade on his head. Next to the monk stood a pair of young boys and girls, whose skin was as fair as snow, as if they were made from flour. Their hair was tied into tiny braids, and they were staring at Wu Qi with their big, round eyes. Merciful Buddha. Excellent, excellent. The monk glanced at the mountainous pile of storage treasures before Wu Qi with his big, watery eyes, then bowed and said smilingly, "Fellow Taoist, there is a fate between you and the Buddha. I'm Arhat Bao Sheng, a disciple of the 3 lotus thrones and 6 arms demon subduing great Bodhisattva, a disciple of the great solar will glorious Buddha of the great solar heavenly mirror. The moment I saw you, fellow Taoist, I knew that there is a fate between you and the Buddha. In this life, fellow Taoist will belong to the Buddha. Another fate between him and the Buddha." Wu Qi felt a wave of annoyance in his heart. He smiled bitterly, pointed at the storage treasures, and said mockingly, "Monk, I'll give you half of these treasures, and I'll no longer have any fate with the Buddha. What do you say?" Arhat Baosheng chuckled, then laughed almost instinctively and said, "Of course." But, right after he said that, he immediately realized that something was wrong. Under Wu Qi's mocking gaze, the monk's fair and clean face did not even blush. Instead, he smiled pleasantly and said, "Fellow Taoist, why are you teasing me? There is a fate between you and the Buddha. How can it be changed by mere external objects? Fellow Taoist, please convert sincerely and join my Buddhist sect. Then you'll be able to enjoy boundless scenery and boundless happiness. Wouldn't it be better than struggling bitterly in the mortal world?" After a brief moment of silence, under Arhat Baosheng's widened gaze, Wu Qi slowly put away all the storage treasures in front of him. Smilingly, he turned to Arhat Baosheng and asked, "May I ask, how many Buddhas are there in Buddhism League? You keep saying that Buddha is merciful, but how many Buddhas do you worship?" An Arhat was equivalent to a heaven immortal, a Bodhisattva was equivalent to a golden immortal, and a Buddha was equivalent to a primordial immortal. In all the heavenly realms, the number of famous and top-notch primordial immortals could be counted with 2 hands. On the other hand, the officials had always charged around 1,000 upper-grade energy stones, which was a profiteering method. However, the cost of creating a voice-transmitting formation that could communicate with outer heavenly realms in real time was enormous, and the core of the formation required a dark-tuned divine stone, which was thousands of times more precious than spatial-breaching spirit gold. Ordinary immortal sects could not afford to create such a thing, so no matter how high the fee was, they could not do anything about it. Wu Qi left on a cloud without giving Arhat Baosheng another look. Arhat Baosheng's face darkened as he cried out furiously, "Don't you think you are being too rude, fellow Taoist?" With a move of his right arm, Arhat Baosheng's arm suddenly grew to about 2 miles long. Like a flexible rubber snake, it shrouded a large sheet of golden light as it grabbed towards Wu Qi's shoulder. Specks of golden light shot out of Arhat Baosheng's fingers, while swastikas could be vaguely seen on his fingertips. The palm strike carried a force of over 10 million kilograms, and together with Arhat Baosheng's restrictive divine ability, it was more than enough to imprison an ordinary heaven immortal. But, Wu Qi was not an ordinary heaven immortal. With a shake of his body, he began to teleport within a small area. Every time he teleported, he would only move a distance of 30 to 50 feet. Then, a series of ear-piercing whistles kept ringing out, and the space within 1,000 feet was filled with Wu Qi's flashing and blinking. Arhat Baosheng grabbed 3 times in a row, but failed to touch Wu Qi's body. He could not help but fly into a rage. He roared, "You're going too far. Fellow Taoist, since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame me for being merciless and wiping out your evil fiend league." Taking a deep breath, Arhat Baosheng suddenly roared like a lion, "How dare you rob Qing Su Immortal Pass? Do you still have any respect for your fellow Taoists and the Yu dynasty?" After putting the blame on Wu Qi, Arhat Baosheng glared at him. A green cloud rose from the top of his head, from which came 3 fist-sized relics, rolling and wheeling above him. Beneath each relic was a lotus throne that was emitting a large sheet of green light, resonating with the boundless glow emanating from the relic. As soon as the relic appeared, a golden flame burst out from Arhat Baosheng's body. Surrounded by the Buddhist light, he looked like the legendary Vajra who could subdue all evil. His imposing manner made countless cultivators and mortals below him not dare to raise their heads, and they all dropped to their knees and bowed their heads deeply. With a wave of his right hand, a Vajra wheel appeared in his palm, shrouded in a crimson flame. With a loud cry, the monk was about to throw the wheel out. Right when the monk was about to strike, Wu Qi spun and lazily crooked his finger at the monk and said, "Monk, we are fated to meet today. I'm going to rob the Great Hall of Qing Su Immortal Pass, and rob them of all the energy stones they have accumulated over the years. If you are interested, then come with me. If not, then forget it." Arhat Baosheng stopped abruptly, and the Buddhist light shrouding him vanished as well, revealing his dignified and solemn face, which was devoid of any evil aura. He took a deep breath, put his palms together, and said in a deep voice, Amitabha. Fellow Taoist. Aren't you afraid that the officials of Yu dynasty will investigate this matter? Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, spread his arms lazily, and said with a wry smile, I've killed Feng Qingya. And killed over 30 heaven immortals. Arhat Baoxing's eyeballs nearly popped out as he cried out in shock, You killed Feng Qingya? And killed those cow-noses who stayed in Qing Su Immortal Square all year round? No wonder none of them showed up when I was fighting today. This. How should we split it? How about we split it 50-50? Shaking his head, Wu Qi stared coldly at Arhat Baosheng and said with a smile, 50-50? What a wishful thinking you have. 370, you take 30%, and I'll take 70%. Arhat Baosheng hesitated for a long while, then clenched his teeth and said while shaking his head, at least 60-40. Otherwise, I'll be bringing shame to the Buddhist League. After a moment of silence, Wu Qi nodded slowly and said, So be it. Monk, you want a share for no reason, and you have to be the vanguard. I still want the voice transmitting formation in there. I'll sneak in and find it first, while you attack from the outside. With such a great prophet in front of him, how could Arhat Baosheng care so much? Feng Qingya was dead, and so were the over 30 heaven immortals who stayed in Qing Su Immortal Square all year round. Therefore, Arhat Baosheng no longer had any scruples. Elated, he agreed to Wu Qi's request, and immediately addressed Wu Qi as his brother, as if they were a pair of sworn brothers who had known each other for countless eons. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi rode a cloud and flew hastily towards the great hall of garrison of Qing Su Immortal Pass. As it was quite a distance away, the great hall of garrison of Qing Su Immortal Pass did not know what had happened in Qing Su Immortal Square. Cultivators were still coming from outside, and were being led into the hall by those officials of Yu dynasty to get their identity certificates processed. Wu Qi pressed down on the cloud and walked straight towards the West Hall of Garrison, where the voice-transmitting formation was deployed. A few armored soldiers stopped Wu Qi, and one of them cried out sternly, What are you doing here? Chapter 457. While Arhat Baosheng was fighting a fierce battle outside, Wu Qi was too lazy to pay any attention to him. His cultivation base was at least 33rd tier heaven immortal. Facing these human soldiers who had lost their commander, even if there were several tens of thousands of soldiers guarding this place, they would not be able to hurt even a single hair of Arhat Baosheng. After driving away the few Yu dynasty officials who were guarding in front of the west entrance, Wu Qi pushed open the heavy stone door and walked into the hall. The hall measured 1,000 feet in both width and length, and was only about 70 to 80 feet tall. It was built entirely with black stones, and the lamplight in the hall was dim, giving it a very depressing atmosphere. In the corners of the hall where the lamplight could not reach, there seemed to be some kind of ghost, sighing faintly and silently. There were 24 stone pillars in the hall, each as thick as two people holding their arms around it. On top of these pillars were hung the skulls of strange beasts, which added a gloomy and murderous atmosphere to the hall. Wu Qi frowned. This hall had a history of at least 10,000 years. It was dimly lit all year round, and very few people came here. That was why it had accumulated such a strong yin energy. Presumably, the general who guarded this place had the intention to maintain such a situation. In such an environment, even a heaven immortal would feel depressed when he came here, and he could take the opportunity to ask for a few more energy stones, which was more or less an extra profit. Wu Qi smiled as he saw through the purpose of the grand hall's layout, then came straight to the center of the hall. Four white jade pillars, each as thick as a water tank, stood towering in the center of the hall. They were about 50 feet apart from each other, forming a square space. Nearly 1,000 upper-grade energy stones were inlaid on the jade pillars, and golden runes were densely arranged on them. Wu Qi scanned through these golden runes with his divine will. Each rune was smelted using a few rare and precious materials, and had an excellent effect of guiding energy and resisting the pressure of space. Four prismatic crystals were hovering in the air in the center of the jade pillars. They were pale green in color, glinting faintly and brightly, illuminating the small space. In the center of the 4 crystals was a strange stone, about the size of a human head. It seemed colorless, but if one were to look closely, it seemed to contain countless colorful lights and shadows, and vaguely, strange noises could be heard coming out from it. Profound sound, divine stone. Wu Qi smiled. This piece of dark music god stone was worth tens of thousands of celestial stones. This type of dark tune divine stone was extremely rare. Even in the scroll of stealing, there were only 13 extremely dangerous places that could produce dark tune divine stone. It was fine if it was just dangerous. Naturally, there were powerful beings who could easily enter those dangerous places to mine the mystic sound divine stone. The problem was that the mystic sound divine stone required extremely harsh conditions and an extremely long period of time to be nurtured by the power of heaven and earth. This was something that not even the most powerful beings could pull up seedlings to help them grow. The so-called market value of tens of thousands of immortal stones was only the so-called market price. On the other hand, which power that truly obtained a piece of profound sound divine stone would be willing to exchange it for immortal stones? It was best to have such a strategic resource in hand. After carefully examining the complicated array map drawn on the floor of the Great Hall, Wu Qi exercised his mystic eyes of universe. After confirming that the array map had only drawn a layer on the surface of the floor and did not go deep into the ground, Wu Qi felt relieved and nodded. Since that was the case, he could take away the entire voice-transmitting formation. Apart from the dark tune divine stone in the center, the 4 sky crystals surrounding it were also valuable items, and the 4 jade pillars carved from the spirit-suppressing dark jade were even more valuable. The total cost of building this voice-transmitting formation was more than 100,000 immortal stones. After spending so much time swindling people and kidnapping people, the total number of immortal stones in Wu Qi's hands was less than 1,000. Glancing around, Wu Qi waved his hand and sprinkled out a large number of primordial runes. The primordial runes condensed from his energy flickered in the air for a while, then merged with the surrounding void and laid out several dozens of invisible soundproofing restrictive spells. The air had also begun to twist slightly. When outsiders looked at this place, unless they had cultivated a magical ability like the mystic eyes of universe, there was no way they could see Wu Qi's figure clearly. Quickly activating the voice-transmitting formation, the 4 sky crystals burst out with a strong light, agitating the dark tune divine stone and emitting a strange sound. Wu Qi pressed his right hand on a sky crystal and quickly used his divine sense to communicate with the formation runes inscribed in the sky crystal, transmitting a strange energy fluctuation frequency into it. The dark tune divine stone let out a soft buzzing sound, and the surrounding spirit-suppressing dark jade pillars burst out with an intense light. A huge amount of spiritual energy was extracted from the upper-grade spirit stones and continuously injected into the formation underground. In an instant, an extremely small gap was torn open in the void. Following the energy fluctuation frequency that Wu Qi had transmitted into it, the voice-transmitting formation set up at the core of the Green City Mountain Gate in the extremely distant Xianyang Heavenly Realm was activated. A white mist rose from the voice-transmitting formation, and a hazy figure of a white-bearded Taoist appeared in the white mist. "What's the matter?" the white-bearded Taoist asked quickly and hastily. The voice-transmitting formation consumed a huge amount of energy, as just a few words would cost several hundred upper-grade energy stones. Even though all the immortal sects were wealthy and powerful, such a consumption was still extremely painful. Therefore, all the executing disciples of the immortal sects who controlled the voice-transmitting formation had learned how to transmit the largest amount of information with the simplest words. "It's an important matter, Reverend Li Yang." Wu Qi answered the Taoist's question with a few simple words. "Shut down the formation, Reverend Li Yang," said the Taoist immediately. The voice-transmitting formation dimmed abruptly, and a crisp explosion was heard coming from the spirit-suppressing dark jade pillars behind him. During the short exchange between Wu Qi and the white-bearded Taoist, an upper-grade energy stone had completely depleted all its energy and exploded. Wu Qi could not help but twitch his lips. Sure enough, the voice-transmitting formation was a huge consumer of energy stones. How could ordinary small clans afford it? It was no wonder that Yuanhua sect did not deploy a voice-transmitting formation like this. They simply did not have the capital to use such a luxurious item. Of course, Yuanhua sect did not have the capital to build a voice-transmitting formation either. About 10 breaths of time later, the voice-transmitting formation lit up once again, and a middle-aged Taoist appeared amidst the white mist above it. The Taoist had an elegant and handsome appearance, and when Wuqi laid his eyes on him, he actually had a misconception that he was the most gorgeous man among all the beauties. The Taoist was simply too good-looking. Not only did he have the face of a handsome man, each of his eyebrows, each strand of his hair, every frown and every smile, were perfect. There was nothing that one could find fault with. Even the wisp of beard on his chin did not make him look old, but added a sense of grace and steadiness to him. As for the wisp of beard, Wuqi gave it a quick glance. Every single strand of beard was dark and shiny, without any blemish. Junior Greed offers greeting, Senior. Wuqi cupped his fist and bowed deeply to Reverend Li Yang. What is it? Tell me quickly. Reverend Li Yang put on a straight face and did not waste his breath on Wuqi, but asked him the reason for activating the voice-transmitting formation. Wuqi beckoned to the side. A celestial fiend puppet transformed into Shu Yi and came before the voice-transmitting formation. Reverend Li Yang opened his eyes slightly as he nodded and said, "Ah, Shu Yi. What is it? Tell me quickly." Strange, why didn't you bring the voice-transmitting formation to Panga continent? This magic formation of yours is rented from Yu dynasty, isn't it? Shu Yi cupped his fist and bowed deeply, then told Reverend Li Yang the whole story with the quickest speed and the simplest words. Reverend Li Yang was overjoyed when he heard that. He was too lazy to pay attention to the personal struggle between Taoist Yunzong and Taoist Yunzong, and asked excitedly, if that is the case, an area 1 million miles around in He City could become a mansion of Green City? It is not a possibility, Wuqi answered respectfully. It has already become a mansion of Green City. As long as I, together with Reverend Sanlu, announce it to the people around in He City, we will be able to make Green City occupy an area 1 million miles around in He City in a reasonable manner, and claim the entire Enlu County. Wuqi paused for a brief moment, then smiled bitterly and said, the only trouble is. Reverend Li Yang waved his hand in a heroic manner, then laughed and said, isn't the only trouble Patriarch Xian Yi of Dark Palace? There's no need to be greedy with them. I'll now invite the few elders to Panga continent to attend the opening ceremony of Green City Mansion. If Patriarch Xian Yi has something to say, let him come to me. After a brief moment of pondering, Reverend Li Yang said seriously, of course, before we arrive, you have to be very careful. Do not let that Junior Muji plot against you. There is a great difference between immortals and fiends, and Huiming Heavenly Realm is very far away from Xianyang Heavenly Realm. If you are harmed, even Green City will not be able to ask for justice from Dark Palace. If that is the case, He City will not be fated with Green City. Wuqi and Chi Shu Yi cupped their fists and bowed respectfully. Taoist greed. Reverend Li Yang said happily. You've done well, very well. Since you admire Green City so much, when I go to He City, I'll take you as my personal disciple. Your contribution is worthy of such a reward. Wuqi cupped his fists and bowed deeply once again. Taoist Li Yang roared with laughter, then turned off the voice-transmitting formation. It was his last 3 laughs that depleted the energy of 2 upper-grade energy stones, causing them to explode and shatter into pieces. As soon as the formation was turned off, Wuqi stretched out his hand and unleashed several dozens of restrictive spells, sealing the entire formation. After that, he twisted his body, and 3 celestial fiend puppets rushed out from his body. Together with Shu Yi, they stood around the formation, thrusting their hands into the ground. With a light snort, they pulled out the ground 100 feet in circumference. A beam of black light shot out from the Black Dragon's spirit ring and shone onto the voice-transmitting formation. Then, Wuqi placed the entire formation into it. After a few loud laughs, Wuqi retracted all the celestial fiend puppets and rushed out of West Hall. Corpses were strewn everywhere outside the hall. At least 10,000 soldiers were killed on the spot. Huge cracks and holes could be seen everywhere on the ground. Arhat Baosheng was laughing as he received a large storage bracelet from a few black-clothed officials. His face fell when he saw Wuqi rushing towards him. Without hesitation, he grabbed the storage bracelet and spun, preparing to leave. Not allowing Arhat Baosheng to flee, Wuqi came before him with a blink. He opened his mouth and spat out the acquired Earth Spirit Pearl with a loud buzzing sound, rolling up a monstrous magnetic force and smashing it out. The gravity in the surroundings suddenly increased by 1,000 times. Arhat Baosheng's body turned stiff, and his flying speed suddenly became no different than an ordinary human walking. With his face turning pale, Arhat Baosheng forced a smile and handed the bracelet over to Wuqi. "Fellow Taoist, this is. Wuqi took the bracelet with a carefree attitude, then stared at Arhat Baosheng and said with a cold smile, "I thought you would run away with the money." Arhat Baosheng's eyes went wide as he cried out furiously, "A disciple of the Buddhist League never lies. Since we have agreed on a 60-40 split, how could I do that? You damned Taoist." Wuqi moved very quickly. While Arhat Baosheng was trying to cover his embarrassment with words, Wuqi suddenly glared at him. A beam of purple light flew out from his wrist and tied up Arhat Baosheng tightly. Not waiting for Arhat Baosheng to break free from the spirit-restricting rope, Wuqi picked up a golden axe he robbed from Mr. Gold and swung it down forcefully. Suddenly, a lotus flower burst out from Arhat Baosheng's body, pushing the spirit-restricting rope far away. However, when Wuqi swung the axe down, it still landed on his shoulder, nearly severing his arm. Wuqi snorted coldly. With a wave of his right hand, he tore the black cloth covering Arhat Baosheng's face, then spun and left. Arhat Baosheng stamped his feet and cursed furiously, while Wuqi burst out laughing from a distance. "I am Arhat Baosheng, the disciple of the 3 lotus thrones and 6 arms demon subduing great Bodhisattva, a disciple of the great solar will brilliant Buddha of the great solar heavenly mirror." Amidst Arhat Baosheng's exasperated roar, Wuqi had long fled far away. Chapter 458. After tricking Arhat Baosheng before leaving, Wuqi was laughing all the way. As for whether Arhat Baosheng would kill him or flee after hearing the news, it was none of his business. As Wuqi had shouted with all his strength, all the several million people inside and outside of Qingsu Immortal Pass had heard him. How could Arhat Baosheng kill so many people in Qingsu Immortal Pass? After laughing all the way, Wuqi opened the storage bracelet and gave it a glance with his divine will. What he saw made Wuqi's heart twitch violently. The general who guarded Qingsu Immortal Pass was so fat. There was a huge pile of immortal stones in the bracelet, and none of them were below middle-grade energy stones. Instead, they were all upper-grade and supreme-grade energy stones. In total, there were more than 500,000 upper-grade energy stones. Since Feng Qingya was the overseer of Qingsu Immortal Pass, all those who came and went would have a layer of skin flayed. On top of that, he took a commission from Qingsu Immortal Square, collected taxes, and received the gifts from others, so these energy stones were really not a lot. As Qingsu Immortal Pass was a huge place, all the cultivators from the surrounding 300 provinces would come here to trade. How huge would the annual trade volume be? It was a pity that the energy stones in Qingsu Immortal Pass's storehouse had to be submitted to Yu Dynasty's national treasury every 3 years. Otherwise, Wuqi's harvest would be even greater. He took a deep breath. The amount of energy stones and immortal stones in the bracelet was nearly 10 times more than Wuqi's entire wealth. For a moment, Wuqi felt that he should go to the other few immortal passes and immortal squares established by Yu Dynasty to test the waters. If it was convenient for him, he really wanted to rob all of them. Smacking his lips, he shoved all the energy stones and immortal stones, as well as other precious items that piled up like a mountain into the black dragon spirit ring. After that, Wuqi let the ring devour the storage bracelet as well, completely destroying all the evidence. With a sway of his body, his Taoist robe, undergarments, boots, socks, and even the hair band on his head were ripped to shreds. The black dragon's spirit ring spat out a brand new moon-white Taoist robe, a pair of white deerskin boots, and a towering crown inlaid with gold and jade on his head. He tied a jade belt around his waist, held a rui scepter carved out of spirit jade in his hand, and had a horsetail whisk made of heavenly worm silk with a handle made of purple gold inserted into his collar. After that, he changed his appearance and transformed into a Taoist with a fair and clean face. Quietly, he exercised his cultivation technique and released a tiny bit of the fiend energy from his inferno nether nascent soul. Together with the cold energy exuded by the fake nascent soul who was cultivating the dark Yin water scripture, he was shrouded in an immense evil aura and a threatening cold air. Coupled with his magnificent appearance, anyone with a discerning eye would know that he was not someone to be trifled with. After that, he assumed a stance of keeping everyone away from him, then stepped on a cloud and flew quickly towards Anhe City. When he was about to reach the shore of the Great Lake, Wu Qi suddenly thought of Feng Qinggu whom he bumped into on his way here. After hesitating for a brief moment, Wu Qi took a detour, planning to detour around the 10,000 miles wide forbidden zone set by Feng Qinggu and her people. He did not want to bump into that unruly girl again and get himself into trouble for no reason. But, when trouble came knocking on his door, it was useless to avoid it. Wu Qi kept a great distance away from the place where he had a conflict with Feng Qinggu. As a result, he took a detour of over 30,000 miles, and right when he stepped onto the shore of the lake, a large shadow loomed over Wu Qi's head. Raising his head in surprise, Wu Qi saw a gigantic bird with a wingspan of over 10 miles, struggling to fly past him. The bird's mouth was wide open, yet it could not make any sound. Several dozens of thick iron chains stretched out of its mouth, each several hundred miles long and taut, and were being pulled by a group of burly longbow men in the distance. Several thousand longbow men were roaring and yelling the battle cry of a golden-armored general, while pulling the iron chains with all their strength. The long iron chains were stretched so tight that they produced creaking noises. Occasionally, they would bump into each other and send up large amounts of fire sparks. Every single longbow man had the strength to carry a mountain, but even with the combined strength of several thousand longbow men, they were still dragged by the gigantic bird, sliding step by step towards Wu Qi. Obviously, these longbow men were not a match for the gigantic bird. Even with the combined strength of several thousand of them, they were still weaker than the gigantic bird. Wu Qi was struck dumb. The gigantic bird flying over his head had a wingspan of over 10 miles, and its entire body was covered with long, pale green feathers that looked almost colorless. Strong gusts of wind wheeled swiftly around the gigantic bird, shrouding it in a thick layer of wind. The feathers of the gigantic bird were fluttering along with the strong wind, especially the 3/10 of miles long feathers on its tail, which were sparkling with a dazzling green light. Every time the feathers moved, tens of hundreds of miles tall whirlwinds would silently rise from the ground. The gigantic bird was so huge, and the wind was so violent. But, when the gigantic bird was flying and the strong wind was blowing, not even the slightest sound could be heard. The bird, the wind, seemed to be a part of the atmosphere. It and the strong wind it caused had completely merged with the sky and the atmosphere. Therefore, when it was flying and the strong wind rolled, not even the slightest sound could be heard. Every time the gigantic bird flapped its wings, it would emit an indescribably beautiful aura that faintly matched the nature and the universe. It made Wu Qi's heart twitch, as if he had peeped into a trace of the secret of the world. This was the legendary divine bird, the gale. According to the legends, this kind of bird spent its entire life flying in the sky, and would never land on the ground unless it was dead. They flew proudly in the sky millions of miles above the ground, hunting flood dragons flying in the sky as their food. The supreme experts of the gale could even hunt and kill heavenly dragons, and even feed on true dragons. Obviously, the gale flying over Wu Qi's head was just a rookie who had just reached adulthood. Its overall strength was only equal to an ordinary heaven immortal, and it was struggling by relying on the innate divine ability of controlling the wind, as well as the innate divine strength of the Gale clan. If it were an experienced adult Gale, it would have the power to wipe out several thousand longbow men in an instant. Only a rookie who had just reached adulthood would be tempted by the aroma of roasted flood dragons and great pythons placed on the surface of the ocean, and would excitedly soar down from the safe sky millions of miles above the ground, devour several dozens of roasted flood dragons and great pythons in one gulp, and have their throats hooked by special iron hooks, plunging them into such an embarrassing situation. However, according to the arrangement Wu Qi saw when he came here, these iron chains were nailed to the reef with iron stakes. But now, they had turned into a gale, dragging several thousand longbow men in a desperate struggle. Apparently, the gale had been struggling for a long time, and the iron stakes had been broken by it. While Wu Qi was absent-mindedly sizing up the gale which contained an endless power, Feng Qingwu's hoarse and furious roar was suddenly heard coming from behind. "Daoist, stop this beast, and I'll reward you handsomely. As long as you cooperate with us and capture this gale alive, Prefecture Overseer will definitely reward you with endless benefits." Wu Qi turned to look over his shoulder, and saw Feng Qingwu riding a Pegasus in a sorry state, leading nearly 1,000 cavalrymen and running wildly towards him. Her armor was torn and tattered, exposing large patches of snow-white skin in many places, and some had deep wounds that kept oozing out blood. Her left arm hung loosely at her side, and judging from the way it was swaying, it must have been broken at the shoulder. The cavalrymen behind Feng Qingwu were in an even worse state. Many of them were missing noses and eyes, and their bodies were covered in blood. They looked as miserable as one could imagine. At first glance, this group of cavalrymen was exactly what Wu Qi described as a defeated army. Perhaps it was because Wu Qi did not follow Feng Qingwu's order to stop the gale immediately. Feng Qingwu's face twisted ferociously as she cried out, "You bastard! Do you want to die, you Daoist? Quickly stop the gale, or else I'll cut you into 1,000 pieces and wipe out your entire sect." This line again. Wu Qi shook his head. Who exactly was the one who had spoiled this woman to be so arrogant? However, Wu Qi was too lazy to argue with this woman. He rode a cloud and flew several hundred feet up into the sky, then threw out a lower-grade magical flying sword lazily. A 3-feet-long sword beam that was neither white nor grayish flew out in a crooked manner towards the gale's buttocks. But, when the sword beam was still 3 to 5 miles away from the gale, it was blown away by a strong gust of wind. Amidst the strong gust, countless wind blades twisted and turned the flying sword Wu Qi threw out into a dozen pieces of scrap metal, falling to the ground. Biting his own lip, Wu Qi cried out, "What a powerful bird!" Then, he opened his mouth and coughed out a mouthful of blood. Wu Qi retracted the cloud and fell to the ground, trembling and unable to get up for a long time. All Wu Qi wanted to do was to put on an act and fool Feng Qingwu. He did not want to be involved in this mess. He did not have any friendship with the gale, and he had a grudge with Feng Qingwu. So, he just wanted to stay out of it. Therefore, he fell to the ground, crying and wailing, holding his buttocks and twisting his body like a wounded caterpillar. Feng Qingwu rode up to him. Staring fixedly at the gale, she did not even look at Wu Qi as she scolded in a low voice, "Useless trash." With a loud shout, Feng Qingwu pulled out a javelin from a leather quiver hanging next to the saddle, then casually threw it towards Wu Qi's chest. Wu Qi was struck dumb. Why did this woman want to kill him? At least, he had shot out a flying sword just now, which had helped her a little in terms of face. But, how could she kill him just like that? Frowning, Wu Qi twisted his body and slid over 10 feet away like a swimming fish, dodging the javelin just in time. The javelin, which was made of metal, was heavily shot down, and was inserted into the solid rock ground more than a foot deep. Feng Qingwu turned to look at Wu Qi with a surprised expression, then said with a cold grin, "You do have some abilities. But, how dare you dodge my attack?" Pointing a finger at Wu Qi, Feng Qingwu cried out coldly, "A few of you go and kill this trash. Search his soul and find the location of his sect. After that, kill every single member of his sect." The few cavalrymen brought here by Feng Qingwu answered, then rode towards Wu Qi. They pulled out their heavy battle axes and swords and swung them down forcefully towards Wu Qi. Shrill whistles of wind breaking echoed out as a dozen of axes and swords thrust whistling through the air, shooting straight towards Wu Qi's vital parts. Wu Qi flew into a rage and snapped, "Crazy woman, is your brain filled with water? Lao Tzu was helping you to kill this bird just now." With a teleportation, Wu Qi evaded the few cavalrymen's attack, then came next to Feng Qinggu with a flash. Flipping his hand, he threw out a thunderbolt towards her face. Shocked, Feng Qinggu spun around and cursed, "Are you pretending, you filthy Taoist?" Right at this moment, Gale's body suddenly froze in midair, then 3 long feathers behind its tail swung out and smashed down viciously towards Feng Qinggu. 3 black gusts of wind, each one 100 miles long, came crashing down soundlessly with a suffocating pressure. As Wu Qi was right next to Feng Qinggu, he was enveloped by the gusts as well. Chapter 459. When the chain was broken, the Gale swallowed a few times happily, then swallowed the iron hook in its mouth, along with a section of the chain. Drops of blood trickled out from the corner of its mouth. Its mouth and throat were cut by the iron hook, and now that it had swallowed the hook, the wound was exposed, and the blood was oozing out. The Gale gave Wu Qi a deep look, then threw its head back and let out a joyful cry. After that, it flapped its wings and produced a strong gust of wind. Within an area of 1,000 miles in circumference, a whirlwind of black dragons emerged from the ground and shot straight up into the sky. The bodies of nearly 1,000 men disintegrated in midair, and everything in their bodies turned into wind and air. As the tail feathers of the Gale shook slightly, the air sprayed in all directions. Their bodies, their armors and robes, their weapons and ornaments, everything was eroded by the strong wind, turning into invisible gusts that swirled wildly in the sky. The tiger-fang spear was 16 feet long, as thick as a bowl, and its tiger-shaped spearhead was 3 feet and 6 inches long. It brought up a strong gust of wind, roaring like a ferocious tiger as it pierced through the air with a large sheet of golden gleam. When the tip of the spear was still 70 to 80 feet away from Wu Qi, the spear intent had already ripped Wu Qi's Taoist robe, exposing a large patch of skin and flesh. The black dragon's eyes lit up slightly. He gave Wu Qi a glance, then the corner of his huge mouth curved up into a bizarre smile. 9 tinkling noises rang out, followed by a deep, muffled ring of a bronze bell. A dark cloud drifted over from the north in a seemingly slow and light manner. On top of the cloud was a heaven dragon, about 8 miles long, with the cultivation base of a 28th tier heaven immortal. Between the 2 dragon horns on the head of the black dragon was a heavy, ancient-looking, square-shaped hall built with huge black stones. 18 black stone pillars were erected at the entrance of the hall. The tops of these pillars were sunken and filled with kerosene, and the pale green flame rose several tens of feet high, casting a dark green hue on the black dragon's body. The strong wind stirred up by the 3 tail feathers of the Gale dissipated, and Feng Qinggu, who was suppressed by the Gale and could not move, rose to her feet with a pale face, then dropped to her knees and kowtowed respectfully to the north. One after another, the longbow men who were yelling and pulling the iron chains dropped to their knees, respectfully touching their foreheads to the ground. Wu Qi threw his head back and laughed, "Go, go, don't stay on the ground. A divine beast like you should soar above the 9th heaven. Why do you have to be so greedy? Go back and let your old man spank your butt. Ha ha ha, quickly run away." Wu Qi used the wind to fly lightly in the air and was about to escape on his sword light. He laughed wildly at Feng Qinggu, who was struggling bitterly in the storm, and said, "Woman, don't think that everyone under the heaven will do as you please. Who do you really think you are?" At this moment, Feng Qinggu had transformed from an awe-inspiring general into a pug that wagged its tail and begged for its master's love. Wu Qi glanced at the black dragon. This big fellow could tell that Wu Qi had cultivated the dragon transformation script. Any living beings who possessed the bloodline of dragons and cultivated the dragon transformation script would emanate an aura that only pure-blooded dragons could sense. Wu Qi did not deliberately restrain the aura, and that was why the black dragon had discovered the secret of Wu Qi's body. What kind of frightening power was this? Wu Qi's eyes shone brightly, and a dense fiend energy burst out from all over his body, transforming into a dark wall that shielded him within. Strong dark green winds kept blowing soundlessly around him, silently but determinedly attacking the inferno hell wind unleashed by Wu Qi. However, the fiend energy contained a more brutal, corrosive and devouring power than the wind. The wind was gradually melted away, while the fiend energy began to struggle after devouring the wind. "Young master, why did you come here in person?" Feng Qingwu's voice had turned sweet, as if there was a piece of royal jelly in her throat. The sweetness gave Wu Qi goosebumps, and the flattering, and servile tone in her voice was full of flattery, and servility. Wu Qi had a feeling that she only lacked a tail. As long as she had a tail, she would definitely try her best to wave it like a fan. Feng Qingwu's body was trembling slightly. She raised her head and gave Wu Qi a flattering smile. At that moment, Wu Qi even thought he was hallucinating. He had met Feng Qingwu twice, and both times, she was so arrogant, cold, and insufferably arrogant. How could she have such a flattering smile on her face? Shivering, Feng Qingwu pressed her forehead against the ground and said with a stammering voice, It's almost done. But this puffy-haired Taoist interrupted. He cut the chain and let Galewind escape. 3 of Galewind's tail feathers smashed down, and Feng Qingwu's face turned pale instantly. With great difficulty, Feng Qingwu raised her head, and when she saw that Wu Qi could actually remain unscathed after being struck by Galewind, and was not killed by it, she could not help but cry out in joy, "That puffy-haired Taoist! Quickly capture this Galewind, and I'll reward you handsomely. Gold, silver, jewelry, beautiful girls, as long as you want it, there's nothing I can't give you." Those Longbow people were trembling, and none of them dared to raise their heads. The young man turned his head slightly and stared coldly at Wu Qi. He gave Wu Qi a once-over, then suddenly laughed mockingly and said, "Feng Qingwu, are you trying to shirk your responsibility? How could a mere peak-stage nascent soul cultivator break the dragon fishing hook, which is forged with 10 types of wicked metals and quenched with dragon blood? How could a little Taoist like him own an immortal item? How could he control an immortal item? Do you think I'm an idiot?" 3 drumbeats later, a total of 360 huge bone talismans, each measuring 1,000 feet in length and 80 feet in width and pieced together using some unknown white bone armor, rose from all directions. Blinding grayish-white light blanketed the void, and the air around Wu Qi froze abruptly, while all teleportation spells were broken. The celestial scarlet fiend escape art Wu Qi had just exercised was broken, and the inferno hell fiend energy condensed in his body was thrown into a state of chaos. The turbulent inferno energy exploded inside his body and brought a severe pain to Wu Qi's meridians. A light clang rang out. Amidst the nearly 100 golden-armored men standing on the back of the black dragon, a burly man holding a tiger fang spear flashed and came before Wu Qi. He spun the spear and thrust it straight towards the root of Wu Qi's thigh. A clear cry rang out. Borrowing the tremendous force, the gale soared into the sky. Like a bolt of lightning, its huge body smashed through layers of clouds in just a blink of an eye, then disappeared into the sky with ease. The young master sized up Wu Qi for a while, then sneered and said, "Using teleportation spells with a cultivation base of nascent soul realm? That is possible. Fellow Taoist, may I ask, who is your master, and which primordial immortal is your disciple?" Wu Qi was taken aback, but with a twist of his body, he fled to one side. With a blink of his body, Wu Qi had fled tens of miles away, barely avoiding the direct impact of the gale's tail feathers. Wrapped in a strong dark green wind, the tail feathers landed lightly on the ground, enveloping Feng Qingwu and the several hundred knights around her. Abruptly, Wu Qi felt his body lightened, as several dozens of whirlwinds burst out from beneath his feet, rolling him up into the sky. When the black dragon was about 2 to 3 miles away from Wu Qi, he stopped and landed heavily on the ground. For dragon claws were gripping a lofty mountain, while his body was coiled up on top of it. He raised his head high, and a young man slowly walked out from the palace above him. He was clad in a golden robe, fully embroidered with patterns of qilin with purple and silver threads. He was not wearing any armor, but a helmet shaped like a wolf's head. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi was about to fabricate an origin for himself. Suddenly, the young master tilted his head sideways and moved his lips, vaguely forming the word capture. But obviously, the black dragon had no intention of reminding the young master. He opened his mouth wide, yawned, and closed his eyes. Standing on the dragon's head, the golden-robed young man gave the long-bow man kneeling on the ground a cold glance, then gave a fierce glare at the broken iron chain. A cold sneer was squeezed out of the young man's mouth as he asked coldly, "Where is the gale? Feng Qinggu, where is the gale you promised?" The gale was terrifyingly powerful, and it contained a power of law that pointed straight to the source of wind. Wu Qi's body spun rapidly along with the gale. A gale kept invading his body, trying to turn him into a wisp of wind, a wisp of air. Black fiendish gleams burst out from his body. Just as Wu Qi was about to flee using the celestial scarlet fiend escape art found in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, a deep, muffled drumming was heard coming from all directions. The first drumming shook the mountains and rivers, and the raging black tornado suddenly dissipated. The second drumming shook the earth, and the surrounding mountain ridges suddenly trembled, while countless rocks slid down from the mountaintops. The third drumming shook one's heart. Wu Qi's heart gave a violent jerk, and all the blood in his body rushed to the top of his head. A huge amount of blood gathered on his face, turning it red, and the blood vessels on his face burst, revealing large patches of blood-red spots. Wu Qi flew up into the sky together with the gale, flying straight towards the gale. Underneath each bone talisman was an old man, clad in a black sackcloth, barefoot, with a hemp belt tied around his waist, and wearing a tall jade crown on his head, sitting cross-legged in midair. An immense spirit light was radiating from their bodies, and their bodies were covered with a layer of white light about the thickness of a thumb. The dazzling white light kept flashing, covering their bodies like a layer of glaze that emitted a strong light. It gave one a strange illusion that they had been separated from this world, and were no longer bound by some rules of this world. Wu Qi did not pay any attention to Feng Qinggu. This woman was too full of herself, and the arrogance and conceit that went deep into her bones was really disgusting. He pulled out the sword of greedy wolf and lightly swiped it over the gale's mouth. Then, he swung the sword and cut off the several dozens of iron chains hooked onto the gale's mouth. Then, Wu Qi kicked the side of the gale's mouth, then continued to fly backward at top speed. Wu Qi did not say a word. He was quickly digesting and analyzing the information told by this young man. Those disciples of primordial immortals could also use the divine ability of teleportation with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. Judging from this, the divine abilities and cultivation techniques cultivated by these disciples of primordial immortals were much stronger than ordinary cultivators. After all, they were the disciples of primordial immortals. With great effort, he turned his head and looked over at Feng Qinggu and her company. A fist-sized, pale golden beast skeleton with 2 horns was hovering above her head. 7 beams of golden light were shooting out from its 7 apertures, blocking off the attack of the surrounding wind, firmly protecting Feng Qinggu in a narrow space with a diameter of less than 10 feet. The nearly 1,000 knights brought here by Feng Qinggu did not have such a powerful treasure to protect themselves. Just like Wu Qi, their bodies flew up lightly into the sky, and in just a blink of an eye, the wind invaded their bodies and turned them into wisps of wind. Feng Qinggu's body began to tremble violently, and Wu Qi could even hear the sound of bone cracking coming from her body. Feng Qinggu cried out hoarsely, "Young master, you are wise. Although this puffy-haired Taoist has a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm, he can actually teleport. His overall strength is comparable to a heaven immortal." Chapter 460. As the tiger-headed spear approached, Wu Qi twisted his body, still trying to teleport away. He didn't want to fight with the golden-armored man. However, the surrounding air suddenly trembled, and the magic power he gathered was shattered. Wu Qi's body swayed, and he nearly suffered an internal injury from the backlash of the subspace. The 360 huge bone talismans in the surroundings shone with a dazzling white light, intertwining with each other and locking down the entire void within a radius of 100 miles. With Wu Qi's current cultivation base, it was impossible for him to shatter the seal of the bone talismans. Not good. This is going to be fun. A cold gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes as he pulled out the flaming magpie sword, gripped the hilt with a backhand grip, and slashed at the Tiger Fang spear. The golden-armored man didn't use any divine abilities or spells, but only the divine power of his fleshly body. Wu Qi wanted to see what abilities this man had, so he simply circulated the divine power of his fleshly body to meet the spear head-on. A loud clang rang out. Wu Qi's wrist shook violently, and his fingers could no longer hold the flaming magpie sword. The immortal sword was knocked several thousand feet away, leaving a red trail of light in the air. However, the immortal sword had its own spirit. When Wu Qi loosened his grip, the sword was knocked away. After flying several thousand feet away, it automatically transformed into a stream of flame and shot back into Wu Qi's palm. Wu Qi's body was thrown backward by a tremendous force like a leaf blown by a violent gust of wind. He lost his footing and was knocked back tens of miles in a row. Only then did he barely manage to perform an incantation gesture to stabilize his body. His fingers were cramping, and bursts of pain and numbness came from his fingertips to his wrist. The strike just now had nearly shattered all of Wu Qi's finger bones and meridians. If it were not for the innate yin energy of yin and yang that was constantly nourishing his fleshly body, allowing Wu Qi's body to possess the softness and tenacity of the innate yin energy, Wu Qi's entire palm would have been shattered by the force before he absorbed the innate yin energy of yin and yang. That man's strength was strong, very strong. His physical strength was at least 10 times that of Wu Qi's. Now that Wu Qi had broken through the realm of 35 transformations of Heavenly Dragon, with just his fleshly body alone, it was comparable to the power of a 35th tier heaven immortal casting a powerful divine ability with his strongest energy. The man's pure fleshly strength was 10 times stronger than Wu Qi's. In other words, his strength was comparable to a peak 32nd tier heaven immortal. His body did not have the slightest trace of magic power aura or spiritual chi fluctuation. He had relied purely on his physical strength to achieve such a terrifying strength. What a freak! Wu Qi rubbed his right hand and forced out a smile. Holding the Tiger Fang spear in his hand, the burly man bent his legs slightly, stared coldly at Wu Qi, and said with a cold grin, "Not bad. You can withstand 10% of my attack. Among those weak cultivators, you are an anomaly." Taking a deep breath, the burly man said coldly, "The cultivation of fleshly body cultivation is widely spread among cultivators. But, how can you, the immortal cultivators, endure the pain of tempering your fleshly body? In all the heavenly realms, only 1 out of every 100,000 cultivators practice the cultivation of fleshly body cultivation, and not even 1 out of every 10 million cultivators could achieve some results in it. You are amazing." Wu Qi gave the burly man a thumbs up and said, "You are amazing as well. You can cultivate such a powerful strength with the body of a human. That's very amazing." The burly man shook his head mockingly and said coolly, "Do you think you're praising me? Instead, I think you're humiliating me. Don't look down on us mortals. The supreme experts of the human race are strong enough to fight against primordial immortals. I'm 35 years old this year, and I only have this little cultivation base. So, what does that mean to me?" Wu Qi's scalp went numb. This burly man was only 35 years old. How could he possess such a frightening strength just by tempering his fleshly body? How was he any different from a monster? Cultivators breathed in and out the natural energy, studied the mysteries of heaven and earth, tempered their nascent divinity and soul, worked hard for 1,000 years, and finally became heaven immortals. After that, it would take 100,000 years of hard work for each tier they advanced. Only then could they possess the miraculous power of toppling mountains and overturning seas. A 35-year-old human could possess such a frightening strength with just his fleshly body alone. He was definitely a monster. Judging from his words, it seemed he was not satisfied with his own cultivation base. In other words, there were people among the human race who were younger than him, but stronger than him. Otherwise, why would he say that Wu Qi's praise was a humiliation to him? Wu Qi gasped and murmured to himself, "You're only 35 years old." Standing on the dragon's head, the golden-robed young man cried out coldly, "Storm, why are you wasting time with that Taoist? Just break his limbs and capture him alive. He should pay the price for ruining my plan. I'm planning to give this gale to my father as a gift for his 300th birthday." Storm answered. He rubbed his palms together, and the spear began to spin rapidly in his palms. The tip of the spear glowed with a round golden light, and a large number of sharp wind blades emerged. Storm gave a loud laugh and began to run. He circled around Wu Qi and turned into hundreds of afterimages, surrounding Wu Qi and forming a wall made of human shadows. Amidst the shrill whistling of the air, Storm suddenly thrust his spear toward Wu Qi over 1,000 times in a row. The shadows of the spear were dazzling, and the wind created by the spear was deafening. The entire sky was filled with afterimages of the spearheads, which were coming at Wu Qi from all directions. Wu Qi felt a chill run down his spine. He exercised the mystic eyes of universe with all his strength, and the countless afterimages of the spear gradually revealed their true forms. Only 1,080 cold beams remained in their original form, piercing towards Wu Qi's limbs from all directions. With a shake of his wrist, the earth element dragon's scale shield issued a deep, muffled cry. 1,080 golden dragon scales shot whistling out and blocked the cold beams. A loud clang rang out. The golden dragon scales were knocked away, but the afterimages of Storm's spear disappeared at the same time. Storm cried out in surprise. All of a sudden, a rapid swishing noise was heard. He was surprised that Wu Qi could actually see through his secret spear technique. Without any hesitation, he thrust his spear straight towards Wu Qi's heart. The golden-robed young man laughed. Shaking his head, he said, "Storm, you're a rough fellow. Fine, you're dead now." Before his words could fade away, a white beam of light shot out from the top of Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi gripped the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag tightly and waved it. A shrill whistle towered into the sky. Storm, who was holding the golden spear, felt his body go limp and fell to his knees weakly. His 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls gushed out from his 7 apertures, then were absorbed into the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. With a backhand grip, Wu Qi smashed the flag forcefully, shattering Storm's head and causing his spiritual ocean to fall heavily to the ground. When Storm's body was shattered, it was not the usual sound of bones breaking and flesh breaking, but a crystal cracking sound. This man's body had been tempered to an unimaginable degree. Red blood sprayed out from Storm's body. Looking at Storm's blood that reeked of blood, Wu Qi's first reaction was, "It's a pity that I didn't bring gold horn and silver horn with me." Otherwise, with such an enormous life force contained in Storm's body, their overall strength could be improved tremendously. Storm's fleshly body was ridiculously strong, but his soul was only slightly stronger than that of an ordinary mortal. Before he could take into account the fact that Wu Qi possessed the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, an extraordinary treasure that specialized in attacking souls and nascent divinity, a mighty warrior like him was killed by Wu Qi with just one strike. Blood suddenly returned to Feng Qingwu's face. She gave Storm's dead body a deep look, and a faint smile emerged on her face. Storm's tragic death proved that Wu Qi's overall strength was very strong, and the stronger Wu Qi was, the lesser her responsibility would be. If Wu Qi could kill a few more captains who were as strong as Storm, Feng Qingwu's responsibility would be close to 0. Seeing that Storm was killed by Wu Qi with just one strike, the golden-robed young man's body trembled slightly, and he bellowed furiously, "Kill him!" 12 golden-armored men rushed out from the dragon's back at the same time. They fished out palm-sized bone talismans from their waists and were about to crush them to release the restrictive spells in them to protect their souls. But, how could Wu Qi allow them to activate the bone talismans? With a heavy swing of the jade bone's soul-searching flag, Wu Qi bit the tip of his tongue and sprayed a mouthful of blood onto it. A shrill ghost howl towered into the sky, and a large sheet of dark clouds rushed out of the flag, spreading across tens of miles in just a blink of an eye. Before the 12 golden-armored men could activate the bone talismans, their bodies turned stiff at the same time. Their souls were sucked into the flag, and their bodies fell heavily to the ground. The flaming magpie sword thrust out whistling through the air, slicing them into 24 pieces. When the flaming magpie sword tore through their bodies, a crisp sound of metal clashing could be heard. The fleshly bodies of these 12 golden-armored men were so strong that they did not seem to be human. Another 12 experts had fallen. Feng Qingwu's complexion had completely returned to normal, and she even breathed out a sigh of relief. On the other hand, the golden-robed young man's face turned livid. He opened his mouth and felt a strong taste of blood in his throat. He nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. He shouted hoarsely, "My 72 generals of the minor all heaven! Attack together and tear him into 1,000 pieces. What are you waiting for?" The golden-robed young man roared at the other 59 golden-armored men on the dragon's back, but the last sentence was directed at the black-robed old men sitting cross-legged under the huge bone talismans. Only then did those old men react. They raised their right hands at the same time and recited an incantation. Abruptly, 360 huge bone talismans shone with a bright light. The bodies of the 59 golden-armored men were immediately covered with a layer of grayish-white spirit light, which protected them like a layer of armor. Wu Qi desperately waved the jade bone's soul-searching flag with all his strength. But, shrill ghost howls kept ringing out, and a large number of long bow men were knocked off their feet, while the 59 golden-armored men remained motionless. 3 golden-armored men glided and came before Wu Qi, thrusting 2 spears and 1 blade at the same time towards Wu Qi's vital parts. 1 spear pierced his heart, 1 pierced his throat, and the last hacked forcefully at Wu Qi's neck. A murderous aura that seemed to be able to behead someone with a single slash came assaulting Wu Qi's face. Wu Qi was greatly shocked. He activated the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield with all his might, sending 36,000 golden dragon scales flying out from Qi and wheeling around his body. Loud metal clangs could be heard without an end. 59 strong men in golden armors moved in a strange pattern, forming a magic formation that seemed to be ceaselessly striking like a flood. Heavy strikes landed on the golden dragon scale light over and over again. Wu Qi's energy and blood were trembling violently, and his body, together with the golden dragon scales, kept bouncing back and forth in the air like a rubber ball. After several hundred strikes, the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield nearly disintegrated. Wu Qi gave a muffled snort, and blood was seen trickling out of his 7 apertures. He had suffered some internal injuries. The flaming magpie kept hacking and hacking at the golden-armored men, but the golden armor worn by these men was extremely tough and flexible. No matter how the immortal sword hacked and hacked, it only brought up a large number of sparks. Although the immortal sword managed to break the armor, it did not have enough strength to tear the bodies of these men. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, Wu Qi had suffered a serious internal injury, while the golden-armored men only had some cuts on their skin. Suddenly, Wu Qi coughed out mouthfuls of blood, as his internal organs were cracked. The Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield let out a shrill cry. The continuous heavy blows had made it impossible for the shield to withstand any longer. A crisp ringing noise echoed out, as large pieces of golden dragon scales were knocked flying away. Abruptly, Wu Qi's body was exposed in front of everyone. A spear thrust over like a venomous snake, piercing through Wu Qi's right shoulder from the back. Why does it feel like you're in an unmarked graveyard? Wu Qi's entire body was shrouded in the devil flame, with dark devil aura rolling around him. Only a pair of blood-red eyes could be seen glinting brightly. Through the dark flame and mist, his eyes were the only thing that could be seen clearly. The Inferno Hell Fiend scripture was fully activated. Because of the influence of the devil technique, Wu Qi's voice became sharp and unpleasant like a sandpaper, unmarked graveyard. Today, this place is indeed going to become an unmarked graveyard. Laughing strangely, Wu Qi suddenly pointed his finger at the golden-robed youth and cried out, "I don't kill nameless people. Tell me your name." The golden-robed youth stared at Wu Qi in astonishment. After a while, he smiled and said, "Don't kill nameless people. Could it be that you think you can kill me?" After a brief moment of pondering, the golden-robed youth said in a reserved manner, "Fine, I'll let you die knowing that I'm Feng Jupan, the prefecture overseer of Pang province. The current human emperor has conferred me the title of Marquis Pang." Upon hearing the golden-robed youth's introduction, all the generals of Minor All Heaven stopped attacking. They surrounded Wu Qi, bowed their heads respectfully, and listened attentively to Feng Jupan's words. Feng Jupan stuck out his chest and said coolly, "My father is Feng Lingling, the prefecture overseer of Diyu province. He is in charge of all the affairs in the 900 provinces around Zhong province, and has the power to decide the life and death of all the billions of living beings in the 900 provinces." A cold gleam flashed in Wu Qi's eyes. Yu Huan had mentioned the official system of Diyu dynasty in his confession. Of course, as a prodigal son who had never been to Panga continent, he did not know much, but it was enough for Wu Qi to learn some of the secrets. The Diyu dynasty divided the provinces under the heaven into 9 grades. The size of each province was the same, but according to the variety of products, population, tax revenue, and other objective conditions, the prefecture overseer was also divided into 9 grades from the 9th grade provinces to the 1st grade provinces. The 1st grade prefecture overseer had the power to promote, demote, and even exterminate the officials in the 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and even 9th grade provinces. Pang province was just a 7th grade province, while Zhong province was the only 1st grade province among the 900 provinces nearby. Feng Lingling, the prefecture overseer of Zhong province, was, in fact, the king of the vast territory formed by the 900 provinces. Feng Jupan could not help but sneer when he saw Wu Qi gasp. "Are you afraid now? Are you regretting it? Now you know that you should not meddle in my affairs." Hee, it took me a lot of effort to lure a Gale here, and I was about to present it to my father as a birthday gift, but you actually let it go. Taoist, you deserve to die. You deserve to be cut into 1,000 pieces. Feng Jupan stretched out a finger and gently slit his neck, then said coldly, "After I kill you, I'll capture your soul and hand it over to the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials for interrogation. I want to find out where your sect is, and then..." He dragged his voice and gave a strange smile, then continued in a low voice, "After that, all the men in your sect will be tortured to death, and all the women, after I've enjoyed them, the most miserable fate in the world will be waiting for them." While Feng Jupan was about to proudly tell them what kind of cruel methods he was going to use to torture the people of Wu Qi's sect, all 59 generals of Minor All Heaven suddenly fell to the ground one after another. Their faces were slightly red, as if they were drunk. Feng Jupan was struck dumb. He stared blankly at his trusted subordinates and cried out hoarsely, "What's wrong? What the hell are you doing? Ah! What are you doing?" The black dragon beneath Feng Jupan grinned, then closed his huge nostrils in an inconspicuous manner, firmly blocking the air passage. The black dragon narrowed his eyes, and a faint smile lingered on the corner of his mouth. Drunken dragon incense, it must be this vicious thing. The members of the dragons hated drunken dragon incense very much, so they knew all its characteristics like the back of their hands. Judging by the number of people who had fainted, it must be the effect of drunken dragon incense. Of course, when faced with a cultivator who practiced the orthodox dragon transformation script and possessed drunken dragon incense, the black dragon was too lazy to give Feng Jupan any advice. He stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth, then narrowed his eyes and gave Wu Qi a meaningful look. "I'm just working for money. Don't come to me when you're going to kill someone later." Wu Qi understood the meaning revealed by the black dragon's eyes and brows, and he nearly fell to the ground. Working for money? Is that what he means? He clicked his tongue and sighed with emotion. Wu Qi completely absorbed the enormous blood essence and energy contained in the 3 blood crystals on his chest, completely replenishing the blood essence and energy he had consumed when casting the mist evasion art just now. The flaming magpie swung out with a shrill cry, transforming into a gigantic crimson bird that streaked across the sky. The immortal sword swept across the necks of the generals of Minor All Heaven, chopping off their heads. These generals of Minor All Heaven had very strong fleshly bodies, and their blood was extremely abundant. Their heads were chopped off, and their strong hearts pumped the blood. Blood sprayed out from their necks like water sprayed out from a high-pressure faucet, shooting to a distance of several hundred feet away. The blood of these people was extremely abundant, and the blood flowing out from their necks was like a never-ending stream. The volume of blood in their bodies was at least 10 times greater than that of ordinary people. Blood sprayed all over the ground. Wu Qi let out a few strange laughs, then suddenly transformed into a clump of dark mist and fled into the distance at top speed. Just now, he used the fiend flame to burn the drunken dragon incense powder, and in just a few breaths of time, several hundred kilograms of drunken dragon incense had been burned away. The fragrance was masked by the stench of rotting corpses. Unknowingly, the generals of Minor All Heaven had inhaled a great amount of drunken dragon incense, and had fallen to the ground. Drunken dragon incense had a direct effect on a cultivator's soul and nascent divinity. Therefore, when a cultivator's soul was too strong, the incense would lose its effect. Therefore, the strongest drunken dragon incense Wu Qi concocted could only completely anesthetize a 36th tier heaven immortal. As for those heaven immortals above 35th tier, it could only numb their immortal souls and weaken their overall strength. Unfortunately, although the fleshly bodies of the generals of Minor All Heaven were extraordinarily strong, their souls were no different from ordinary people. A small amount of drunken dragon incense was more than enough to knock down any formidable human warrior, let alone when Wu Qi burned several hundred kilograms of drunken dragon incense in one go. Throwing his head back and letting out a wild laugh, Wu Qi suddenly transformed into a dark shadow and sped towards Anhe City. Feng Jupan was waving his arms and legs in exasperation. Pointing at the dumbfounded old men sitting cross-legged under the bone talismans, he cursed in a hoarse voice, "You bunch of useless fools. Are you all fools? Are you fools? You are the oldest oracles in Pang Province's Directorate of Celestials. You are connected to ghosts and deities, and you claim that there is nothing under the heaven that you do not know. Where are your supernatural spells? Where is your infinite magical power? Why can't you even protect my beloved generals?" All the oracles were rendered speechless. When Wu Qi killed Storm and the other 13 generals with the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, these oracles had instinctively cast spells to defend against soul attacks on the other generals when they rushed out. But, they did not expect that Wu Qi could be so despicable as to use the incense to subdue the enemies. Therefore, they did not cast spells to isolate the poisonous gas and miasma on these generals. As a result, Wu Qi's drunken dragon incense had killed all 59 formidable generals in an instant. Feng Jupan was so angry that he almost coughed blood. While the oracles were still in a daze, they raised their right hands at the same time and performed a finger incantation gesture, pointing at the huge bone talisman hovering over their heads. Immediately, dark clouds began to gather in the sky. Thunderbolts rocked and rocked in the dark clouds, illuminating the dark clouds. All of a sudden, thousands of thunderbolts plunged down from the sky and landed on Wu Qi's body almost at the same time. Accompanied by a jarring cicada cry, the green cicada wings transformed into a large sheet of green mist and rushed out, firmly protecting Wu Qi. However, the power of the thunderbolts was unexpectedly strong. With a shrill cry, the green cicada wings exploded into countless beams of green light that scattered in all directions. The thunderbolts smashed brutally on Wu Qi's body, shattering the dark fiend energy that protected him inch by inch. Then, the thunderbolts struck directly on Wu Qi's body. Half of Wu Qi's body was charred and smoking, while the thunderbolts rushed into his body and wreaked havoc inside. Wu Qi howled in pain. Then, he let out a long cry and rushed straight towards the 3 bone talismans and the 3 oracles of Feng Province's Directorate of Celestials, who were blocking his way. The 3 old oracles raised their hands and performed an incantation gesture at the same time. With a cold gleam flashing in their eyes, they snapped at Wu Qi, "This road is blocked. Get the hell back." An enormous pressure came pressing down on his face like an iron wall. Wu Qi was shocked. Behind him, dozens of old oracles were approaching with the huge bone talismans. Vaguely, they had formed a complicated and bizarre formation in the sky, and were about to continue attacking Wu Qi with a secret spell. If Wu Qi was slightly hindered by the 3 old oracles, he would most likely die here. He opened his mouth and shot out 5 acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements at the same time. Ignoring the fact that he might damage their source, Wu Qi directly detonated all the energy in them. The enormous power that the spirit pearls of 5 elements had accumulated for countless periods exploded in an instant. A strong 5-colored light flashed, and a mushroom cloud rose from the ground. The 3 old oracles and their bone talismans were instantly vaporized amidst the strong light. The 5 acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements flew back into Wu Qi's body with a dim glow, and could no longer move. Suddenly, a huge amount of blood burst out of Wu Qi's body. Using the blood escape art from Scroll of Stealing and the blood escape art from Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, he transformed into a beam of blood light and fled at top speed. But, before he could transform into a beam of blood light, a huge shadow of a skeleton smashed heavily onto his body. A muffled snort rang out as Wu Qi fled and vanished without a trace. All that was left on the spot was blood, which instantly turned into a black, sticky, rotten liquid. Chapter 462. The hazy, skeleton-shaped ghost energy was a restrictive spell cast by several dozens of old oracles at the back. As soon as the ghost energy entered his body, an immense evil energy rushed straight into his heart. The cold air made Wu Qi's entire body feel cold, and nearly paralyzed his entire body. Just when Wu Qi could no longer withstand the invasion of the ghostly aura, and his body turned stiff and was about to fall to the ground, a strange warm current rose from all parts of his body, easily dispelling the ghostly aura. The warm current was very familiar, and it suddenly reminded Wu Qi of that strange bookstore, and the old man who was obviously blind, but was reading a book while shaking his head and praising endlessly. It was the spirit tea given by the blind old man. After Wu Qi drank it, the spirit tea dispelled the stagnant aura of death in his body and healed his injuries by 80 to 90%. Today, it was the spirit tea that saved Wu Qi once again. However, Wu Qi could clearly sense that it was the last bit of power left in his body by the spirit tea. After dispelling the ghost energy that nearly froze Wu Qi, the medicinal strength of the spirit tea disappeared completely. I won't be so lucky next time. Wu Qi began to reflect on the gains and losses this time. It was an undeserved disaster. Wu Qi felt that his luck was really bad recently. He was planning to take a detour to avoid Feng Qingguo and her company on his way back, but he did not expect that the gale would bring Feng Qingguo and bump into him, dragging him into this muddy water again. Not to mention Feng Qingguo and the cavalrymen she led, all of them were either killed or wounded by the gale, leaving only Feng Qingguo, who could not pose any threat to Wu Qi. Feng Jupen. Muttering Feng Jupen's name under his breath, Wu Qi clenched his fists tightly and swore in his heart. Although he had killed the 72 generals of Minor All Heaven, and it was Feng Jupen who had suffered a great loss, Wu Qi could not swallow the anger in his heart. The prefecture overseer of Pang Province? Wu Qi clenched his teeth. He had to take revenge for the fact that he was almost killed by them. It's just a matter of timing. Wu Qi thought to himself. Feng Jupen's father, Feng Lingling, was the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province, a high-ranking and powerful feudal official in the Yu dynasty. If he wanted to take revenge on Feng Jupen, he had to find the right time to kill him with a single strike, and not give him any chance to turn the tables. Or else, he would be killed. But, Wu Qi also thought that perhaps when he was plotting against Feng Jupen, he could also teach Yu Miao a lesson. Yu Miao of Zhong Province's left minister, Yu Miao. Wu Qi could still remember the palm of Yu Miao. Of Wu Qi was the palm of a palm. But, the Yu body of overseer of Yu of, left Yu. Of Wu of Qi's spirit immortal Yu. Wu Qi Wu of Qi of spirit of Qi, of stage, Wu of. The left hand, Wu at Ni, one of however, this blood escape art was too damaging to Wu Qi's blood. After flying for 12 hours in a single breath, Wu Qi was now hundreds of thousands of miles away from where he fought just now. Suddenly, he coughed out a mouthful of blood that looked like clear water and slowly stopped. Quickly, Wu Qi took out a dozen blood crystals and stuffed them into his mouth. After swallowing the blood crystals and slowly digesting them, Wu Qi formed hand seals and quickly absorbed the blood essence and yuan qi to recover his lost energy. Fortunately, he had so many blood crystals transformed from Heaven Immortal's blood essence with him. If it was an ordinary person, after losing more than 70% of their blood essence, it would take them a long time to slowly recover. Dense blood essence and yuan qi gradually spread out. Drops of fresh blood were produced from his bone marrow. His abundant strength was slowly recovering. Wu Qi took in deep breaths, exhaling. His breath was filled with a dense blood-red color. He stood in a remote valley. Every time he inhaled and exhaled, the air within a radius of a mile would fluctuate and spin, forming a small whirlwind. Just when Wu Qi's blood essence was about to recover to its peak state and he was about to stop his surging blood energy, a Buddhist chant was heard. A pure gold Buddhist staff, as thick as a large bowl, struck straight at Wu Qi's back with a muffled roar of a lion. Wu Qi's body trembled, and several defensive spirit artifacts that he had been nurturing inside his body were activated one after another. Along with various colored flames, they rushed out of his body to protect him. These spirit artifacts were given to him by Patriarch Yuan Hua and the other seniors of the sect when he left Green Cliff Planet, and each of them was a rare and exquisite artifact. But, it was clear that the staff was a Buddhist treasure with a quality comparable to an immortal item. A few spirit items were seen rushing and glowing, protecting him. Suddenly, a stream of yellow airflow burst out of the staff, which transformed into a huge dragon head and thrust out from it. The glowing flames of the few spirit artifacts dimmed abruptly, while their item spirits wailed and wailed. A large sheet of bright light exploded, and the staff pierced through all the spirit artifacts and smashed straight into Wu Qi's back. The Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield had just been attacked by 59 generals of Minor All Heaven, and its energy had been greatly depleted, while its item spirit had fallen into a coma. When the staff was less than half an inch away from Wu Qi's back, the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield sensed Wu Qi's state of mind suddenly fluctuating violently. Only then did it let out a dragon roar, unleashing a clump of yellow earth energy that wrapped around Wu Qi. The yellow earth energy wrapped around the staff, slowing its forward momentum and neutralizing 60% of its strength. However, the remaining 40% of its strength still smashed into Wu Qi's back. Like a heavy bombardment from a cannon, it caused Wu Qi's back to cave in by 3 inches. Wu Qi was quietly exercising a cultivation technique to absorb the energy essence from the blood crystals, and his blood and energy were surging ceaselessly in his body. Suddenly, he felt a warm sensation in his chest, and his heart nearly burst out from his chest. He opened his mouth and coughed out a large amount of blood, while Wu Qi was knocked flying several hundred feet away like a kite. Wu Qi spun awkwardly in the air, twisting and turning his body, and finally managed to stabilize his body. Wu Qi staggered a few steps back, then turned to look at the man who sneakily attacked him from behind. He was a monk, standing over 13 feet tall, with a muscular body that looked like it was forged from steel, and his skin took on a strange bronze hue, glinting faintly with a metallic luster. Behind the monk's head was a Buddhist halo with a diameter of 3 feet, and between his brows was a mark of a white crescent moon. He had a dignified appearance, and when he moved, he looked like a lion or a tiger. His upper body was bared, and his lower body was wrapped with a python skin. He looked like an eminent monk who could subdue dragons and tigers, a great benefactor who had committed murder and arson. When he saw Wu Qi turning around, the monk held the staff in his left hand and slammed it hard on the ground, then placed his right hand before his chest and greeted Wu Qi, "Buddha is merciful, merciful, merciful. Fellow Taoist, you have a tough bone. Since I failed to kill you with this staff, I will have to spend more effort today." Wu Qi clenched his teeth and did not answer. Instead, he touched the spot where he was hit by the monk's staff with a backhand. A few vertebrae on the back of his spine were dislocated, and his spinal cord was pressed down, causing his entire body to feel numb. Clenching his teeth, Wu Qi reached out his fingers and grabbed onto the few deformed vertebrae, pulling them out forcefully. With a loud crack, the vertebrae were aligned again. Wu Qi took a deep breath, and the innate wood element energy that contained an endless life force began to flow rapidly in the injured spot. The injury healed quickly, and the pain gradually faded away. When the injury was almost healed, Wu Qi clenched his teeth and stared at the monk as he said angrily, "Monk, there is no enmity between us. Why did you kill me secretly?" The monk chuckled and chanted the name of Buddha, then said with a deep voice, "I'm Arhat Bao Xien. Fellow Taoist, do you find my name familiar? I'm the eldest disciple of the three lotus thrones six-armed demon subduing great Bodhisattva, a disciple of the great solar will glorious Buddha of the great solar heavenly mirror. Fellow Taoist, since you have bullied my junior brother, naturally, I have to find you and settle the score with you." Off in the distance, a dozen auspicious clouds rose into the sky from the valley, as the furious Arhat Bao Xing brought 16 burly monks and came flying towards Wu Qi at top speed on a cloud. Even from afar, Arhat Bao Xing cried out sternly, "You've made me suffer a lot. Not only did I not get to eat the lamb, but I've also gotten myself smelly. Arhat Bao Xing, how can I repay your great kindness if I don't tear you into 1,000 pieces?" Casting a sideways glance at Arhat Bao Xing, Wu Qi turned to Arhat Bao Xien and asked, "How did you find me? Don't tell me you've been following me all the way. That's impossible. I think I'm a very careful person, so it's impossible for me to be followed by you without noticing anything." Arhat Bao Xing had already rushed over on a cloud, raising a Vajra demon subduing sword menacingly as he was about to hack at Wu Qi. However, Wu Qi was too lazy to even give Arhat Bao Xing a glance. He just stared at Arhat Bao Xien with a smile on his face. Arhat Bao Xien coughed deeply, and Arhat Bao Xing, who was charging like a mad tiger just now, immediately stopped attacking. Although the tip of the sword was less than 3 feet away from Wu Qi's head, he still put the sword away, put his palms together and bowed to Arhat Bao Xien obediently, then stepped back on a cloud. Together with the other 16 burly monks, Arhat Bao Xien, Arhat Bao Xing, and the rest of the 18 monks had formed a circle about 100 meters in diameter, tightly trapping Wu Qi inside. Indistinctly, the aura of 18 monks had merged into one, forming an impenetrable wall that firmly trapped Wu Qi inside. When Arhat Bao Xien saw that Wu Qi was trapped in the Vajra heavenly dragon demon subduing ring that was secretly taught by his master, a reserved smile appeared on his face as he slowly fished out a Bodhi leaf the size of a cattail fan from the python's skin wrapped around his waist. The leaf was translucent, as if it was carved out of jade. A ring of golden Buddhist light shrouded its surface, while emanating a strange fragrance that calmed one's mind. This is the Bodhi meditation leaf crafted by my master using the divine ability of the heaven will. If you have any request, I can write something on this leaf with my own blood essence, and the other Bodhi meditation leaf in my master's hand will display it. Similarly, if my master writes something on the other Bodhi meditation leaf in his hand, I will receive the message immediately. Arhat Bao Xien said complacently, "My master is a 3 lotus throne 6-armed demon subduing great Bodhisattva, an expert in subduing demons and devils. With just a glance from the infinite Buddha eyes he cultivates, he can see everything in the universe." Wu Qi nodded and said, "I see. Which Bodhisattva has discovered my trace?" Arhat Bao Xien nodded and said, "We've been waiting here for you since 14 hours ago." Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. 14 hours ago, Wu Qi was fighting desperately with the generals of Minor All Heaven, and he did not know where he would run to, but that Bodhisattva had already predicted that he would come here. Wu Qi smiled wryly. He knew very well that it was because the Bodhisattva's cultivation base and magic power were much higher than his, and that was why he was able to find traces of him in the vast heavenly mystery, and thus predict his future. Unless Wu Qi could form the innate chaotic Dharma body found in the scroll of stealing and completely separate his aura from the heavenly mystery, those almighty experts would be able to clearly grasp his every move. All he needed was the innate yang energy. All he needed was that thread of innate yang energy. Wu Qi took a deep breath, cupped his fist and bowed to Arhat Bao Xian as he said, "Monk, what are you trying to do by stopping me?" Arhat Bao Xian laughed in a deep voice, then nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist, there is a fate between you and the Buddhist League. Please become my master's disciple." Wu Qi was taken aback. Why was there a fate between him and the Buddhist League? However, Arhat Bao Sheng was very straightforward. He cried out sternly, "Cut the crap. Hand over all the treasures you robbed from Qing Su Immortal Pass, then obediently join the Buddhist League and become a coolie boy. If you do that, we'll spare your life today. Otherwise, you won't be able to die even if you want to." Wu Qi said angrily, "So what if you want to rob me? Do you think there is a fate between me and the Buddhist League?" Roaring furiously, Wu Qi opened his mouth and spat out the sword of greedy wolf. A dark beam shot straight towards Arhat Bao Sheng. Chapter 463. The heavenly dragon transformed from the staff grabbed onto Wu Qi's head, while dozens of golden scales flew up to meet it. The dragon claw and the golden scales clashed and produced a deafening boom. The golden scales were scattered in all directions, while the dragon claw was knocked flying away by the heavy earth element energy. Immediately after that, a series of rapid strikes rang out. Wu Qi's body trembled as Arhat Bao Xian's lotus energy exploded on his back, sending thousands of golden scales flying in all directions. The weapons of the other 16 monks, Chi-Chi, landed on Wu Qi's body and knocked him flying away. "You bunch of damn bald donkeys." Gritting his teeth, Wu Qi was about to draw out the innate energy essence in his innate nascent soul to fight these monks with all his might. Suddenly, a sonorous bird cry was heard coming from above. Immediately after that, a shadow blocked out the sunlight, while a strong gust of wind blew down soundlessly from above. The force of the gust was very strong, so strong that it was hard for anyone to accept it. The 18 arhats who surrounded Wu Qi let out a strange cry as they were rolled up by the dark green gust and slammed heavily onto the mountaintop a few miles away. The other 16 monks cried out the name of Buddha at the same time, raising their Vajra scepters, Vajra rings, Vajra swords, and Bodhi staffs. 16 Buddhist weapons were raised up at the same time, smashing down towards Wu Qi's head with Chi-Chi. These monks had the cultivation base of heaven immortals, and each of them was a golden arhat. With the combination of the indestructible body of the Buddhist League and the divine ability of Vajra, these monks could shatter a mountain to pieces with just a casual strike. Ha! Arhat Bao Xian and Arhat Bao Sheng sat down cross-legged on the ground at the same time, forming a circle around Wu Qi. 3 white lotuses floated out from the top of their heads, and between the lotuses were 1, 2, or 3 relics. Dazzling rays of light were emitted from the relics and the lotuses, transforming into a dense Buddhist light that connected the 18 monks into one. The gale gave a sonorous cry, then swung its 3 long tails and slapped down towards Arhat Bao Sheng, who had just risen to his feet. Arhat Bao Sheng let out a miserable howl, as his body was pulled up into the air by the whirlwind, slamming forcefully into another lofty mountain. An ear-splitting sound of bones cracking was heard as Arhat Bao Sheng's head smashed onto a solid mountain rock, shattering it and turning it into a meat paste. More than a dozen adult grand gales clustered around the baby gale. Strong gusts of wind swirled around them as they flapped their wings. In the blink of an eye, they pierced through the layers of clouds and soared into the sky. With a casual wave of his hand, he called back the sword of greedy wolf. Then, Flaming Magpie flew up into the sky amidst a towering flame. A looming crimson bird spread its wings and enveloped Wu Qi. Countless golden scales wheeled quickly around Wu Qi's body, producing ear-splitting whistling noises. Wu Qi retracted the inferno demonic nascent soul's dense demonic aura and injected all the quintessential essence in his body into the fake nascent soul that cultivated the inaction Tao scripture of returning essence. Clouds gushed out from Wu Qi's body, and clear air rose up, making him look like a celestial being. The monks let out strange cries as they slammed into the mountain. The force of the wind was extremely strong, and the force contained in the gale could bring despair to anyone. Among the 18 monks, apart from Arhat Bao Xian, who managed to knock a hole in the lofty mountain with his formidable cultivation base and sprung out from the other side with a gloomy face, all the other 17 monks, including Arhat Bao Sheng, had their bones broken and tendons torn. 13 to 14 monks had their relics smashed on the spot and died miserably. Furthermore, there were many people who were waiting to be killed by the gale in the vicinity. Needless to say, Wu Qi knew that this rookie Gale, who had just reached adulthood, had attracted the seniors of his clan and attacked the army of Feng province led by Feng Jupan. Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. Swaying, he put away the flaming magpie sword and was about to sit down and take a rest. But suddenly, the baby Gale stretched out its claws and grabbed Wu Qi up. Then, it flapped its wings and soared up into the sky. The scripture of inaction emphasized the cultivation of one's nature and body, and the energy cultivated by it was pure, flexible, mighty, and boundless. Using the scripture of inaction as the foundation, Wu Qi circulated the sword technique of heaven-breaking sword Sex 5 elements sword technique, focusing on the third fire sword technique. Streams of sword energy kept bursting out from Wu Qi's body with a scorching heat. Gradually, the crimson bird hovering above his head transformed into a crimson sword beam that shot straight up into the sky. The ghastly sword beam emitted a dazzling light, making it look like a real sharp sword was hovering above Wu Qi's head. What troubled Wu Qi even more was the tremendous pressure brought to him by the Buddhist light. 18 monks were sitting cross-legged and their lips were not moving, but all of them were forcibly instilling Buddhist scriptures into Wu Qi's nascent divinity with the cultivation technique of the Buddhist League's heart connection. Around Wu Qi's ears, the 18 monks were chanting the Sanskrit scriptures, making Wu Qi feel dizzy and seeing stars flashing before his eyes, giving Wu Qi a headache. Arhat Bao Xian laughed mockingly and said, "You are indeed a bold dog. Aren't you just courting death by using the evil league's magic in front of us, a Buddhist cultivator?" All the monks present roared with laughter. One after another, they began to chant the name of Buddha while beams of various colors burst out from their palms, sweeping down towards Wu Qi in an overwhelming manner. The towering sword projection transformed from the flaming magpie trembled violently, producing sonorous and rumbling noises. Wu Qi had injected all his energy into the flaming magpie, but facing the Buddhist light unleashed by the 18 arhats, how could Wu Qi break through the golden light that surrounded him? A shrill cry rang out from Arhat Bao Sheng's relic. Just as the relic was about to turn into a blinding beam and flee, a gale that came swooping down from the sky reached out its claw and crushed the relic into powder. The earth element dragon's scale shield let out a miserable wail as it suffered a series of heavy blows. Vaguely, it seemed like it could not withstand the forces coming from the outside, and was groaning as if it could not bear the burden. It looked like it was about to be shattered by the joint attack of the monks. Feeling helpless, Wu Qi exercised the mystic mist transformation technique from the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture again, transforming his body into a dense dark mist that drifted away in all directions, trying to evade the attacks from the monks. When he thought of the scene of Feng Julian being besieged by a dozen adult Gale, Wu Qi could not help but roar with laughter. He turned to the Gale and said, "Are you here to help me? Ha, do you still remember that it was me who saved you just now?" Wu Qi felt his entire body tensed up, and his muscles were twitching painfully. He felt as if several dozens of steel ropes were coiling around his internal organs, constricting them violently and making it difficult for him to breathe. Wu Qi reckoned that if this continued, he would have all his energy depleted in less than the time to finish a pot of tea. At that point of time, he would no longer have the strength to fight back, and could only surrender and let these monks do whatever they wanted. Arhat Bao Xian let out a furious roar. Suddenly, a bright beam shot out from his waist, and in just a blink of an eye, he vanished without a trace. While the few surviving arhats were about to flee, an adult gale suddenly flapped its wings, shooting out invisible wind blades that shredded their fleshly bodies together with their relic. Arhat Bao Sheng snorted coldly, holding the Vajra-subduing demon's sword in front of him. A sheet of golden light burst out from the sword's edge, enveloping him like a golden bell. The sword of greedy wolf wheeled 13 times around Arhat Bao Sheng at top speed, hacking and slashing on the golden light for 360 times in a row. The golden light trembled and produced jarring metallic noises, yet it failed to break it. Shaking his head, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh. He fished out a few healing spirit pills and shoved them into his mouth, then said in a deep voice, "Cut the crap. Become a monk." I can't bear to part with my black hair, and I can't bear to part with the 3,000 secular worlds. Hee, I think it's better for us to risk our lives. Arhat Bao Xan laughed in a low voice. The staff in his left hand flew out, transforming into a golden dragon that measured 1,000 feet long. Amidst a long cry, it clawed down towards Wu Qi's head. As for Arhat Bao Xan, he performed the incantation gesture of Aquarius with both palms, one in front and one at the back, as if he was releasing an arrow from a bow. He gave a faint snort, and several dozens of tiny golden beams shot out from his palms, forming into a golden lotus flower in the air. In just a blink of an eye, they had arrived behind Wu Qi. Especially the dozens of adult gales, their bodies were stained with blood, and the blood was stuck to their feathers. Wu Qi could tell that it was not the blood from the gales themselves, but the blood that came from the outside. Obviously, they had just killed a lot of people. Before these monks struck, just the Buddhist light unleashed by them had suppressed Wu Qi to the point that he almost coughed blood. The chirping of birds could be heard coming from above. When Wu Qi looked up hastily, he saw a gale with a wingspan of nearly 10 miles falling straight down from the sky. Behind this gale were more than a dozen gales with wingspans of over 100 miles. One look and anyone could tell that they were already adults. These gigantic and majestic birds fell silently from the sky, their greenish-black feathers fluttering in the wind, giving them an indescribable air of elegance and otherworldliness. Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi revealed himself from the dark mist in a sorry state. His skin was ragged, and his body was covered with blisters and blood. The lethality of the Buddhist light on him had exceeded his expectation. He would rather be hit by Arhat Bao Xan's staff several dozens of times than let the Buddhist light touch his body. With a strong taste of blood in his mouth, Wu Qi looked at Arhat Bao Xan, who was glaring fiercely at him. He could not help but shake his head and say, "Are you forcing me to fight with my life?" Amidst the Buddhist light, there were vaguely countless heavenly warriors clad in heavy armors hovering in midair. They stood shoulder to shoulder, forming an impenetrable wall that wrapped tightly around Wu Qi. An enormous pressure came pressing down from all directions, contending with the razor-sharp energy unleashed by the sword energy above Wu Qi's head. Gradually, the sword energy was forced inwards, and Wu Qi could no longer unleash his sword energy, and could only hide it within the sword beams. Arhat Bao Xan laughed evilly, then put his palms together and bowed to Wu Qi. "Fellow Taoist, you still have one more chance. Offer me all your treasures, then join my master and become an acolyte. With that, you won't have to suffer any physical pain today." Arhat Bao Xan smiled faintly, shook his head and said, "Fellow Taoist, are you going to fight with your life? What a pity that the cultivation technique of Buddhism focuses on defense the most. Hinayana indestructible Buddhist light, Hinayana Buddhist light of deliverance, Hinayana Buddhist light of tranquility and evil subduing. 18 mystic Buddhist lights sprinkled down from Chi-Chi, hitting the dark mist that Wu Qi had transformed into. Wu Qi felt a sharp pain all over his body, while the dark mist melted quickly like snow being poured into boiling water. In just a blink of an eye, it had shrunk to about half of its original size. The cultivation technique of Buddhism was specialized in restraining fiend techniques. By exercising the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture in front of these monks, Wu Qi had unknowingly increased the lethality of these monks by at least 3 to 5 times. With a shake of his left hand, the earth element dragon scale shield unleashed 36,000 pieces of dragon scales, which shrouded him in a dazzling light. The golden specks reflected the sunlight and shone dazzlingly. Attracted by the innate earth element energy essence, a thick and solid earth element energy rushed out of the ground and transformed into a thick light barrier that enveloped Wu Qi. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.